The strength of the girder helps determine how long the building itself will stand. We can't understand the explosion of imprisonment in the United States since 1971 without looking at an imperialism's urgent needs and goals of that period. By the same token, we can't develop an effective program around the prison industrial complex without grappling with the stresses and trends of the larger system of imperial rule. To be clear, before you take time to read this chapter, I don't offer any brilliant ideas on strategy. Those will most likely emerge from the organizing and activist efforts themselves. However, some of the concerns discussed may raise questions that go into forming strategy. I definitely look forward to learning from the dialogues that this generates on these issues. Imperialism may sound like the kind of rhetoric we want to avoid, but it's one word that needs to be rescued as the best way to name the system that rules over us. The basis of imperialism is the relentless quest for profits around the globe. Its most striking characteristic is the colossal and grotesque polarization of wealth. That polarization happens between nations, between the rich countries of the North and the impoverished ones of the global South, the impoverished countries of Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia, and at the same time within each country based on class, race, and gender. The poles of dazzling wealth and abject poverty are intimately linked, as the former results from the ruthless plunder of the latter. This system is built on and intensifies all the major forms of oppression, patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy, all of which are structurally central. At the same time, imperialism highlights the global character of the system in a way that explains why the most intense oppression and resistance have been in the South, and that also provides the context for why the liberation struggles of the various people of color have been in the forefront within the U.S. There's no way to capture what the system costs in human life and potential, the pain and loss for all of us. Close to 1 billion human beings suffer chronic hunger, while another 2 billion face nutritional deficiencies. 1 billion lack access to clean drinking water. Just looking at children under the age of 5, imperialism is a holocaust in progress. Over 9 million die every year from easily preventable causes associated with poverty. The price for future generations may be even more severe as the rapaciousness of this global frenzy for profits threatens the very ecological basis for sustaining human life on any scale on our planet. Since most people won't accept living in squalor amid plenty, imperialism entails both the most sophisticated and the most brutal forms of social control. Its most salient feature is war. War after war after war, mainly against the peoples of the South. The domestic front line of such repression is a truly violent and harmful prison industrial complex. Today, 2,300,000 people are held behind bars, about 7 times the number in 1971. That explosion was unprecedented, coming after a 70-year period when the rates of imprisonment had remained more or less constant. This dramatic change did not result from some sudden skyrocketing of criminal activity, but rather from a radical expansion of what was designated as a crime and a draconian increase in the punishments for those crimes. Such extreme measures were driven by considerations way beyond criminal justice and often at cross purposes to the proclaimed goal of public safety. These destructive changes were born from crisis, one much more severe and protracted than the periodic ups and downs of the business cycles that occur over a roughly 10-year period, but rather a situation that threatened the very survival of the system. Such structural crises occur because capitalism is by its nature unstable. The economy is vast and complicated, but the major decisions are made by a tiny corporate and financial elite, with each thinking only of his own profits. When a structural crisis develops, the long-term institutional arrangements that assured a reliable flow of profits and the rule of capital no longer function. One dramatic example was the Great Depression of the 1930s, followed by World War II. At the end of that period, a new set of international institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, were created. At the same time, a new deal was hammered out for the terms of the bargain between capital and labor within the U.S. Those arrangements worked well for capital until they broke down a generation later. That new structural crisis, which emerged between 1968 and 73, is the seedbed for the burgeoning of the prison industrial complex and many related changes in U.S. history. The first and most obvious signs were political, as the resistance to imperialism crested in 1968. Abolition now.
Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, it's the start of a whole brand new week, and we've got a great program for you today. Our one guest will be our entire second hour, Congressman Ro Khanna, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, will spend the hour with us taking your calls in a National Progressive Townhall meeting. Great way to start the week off. Also, the memo that hijacked American democracy and how Democrats can take it back. I want to start with that in this first hour. And the GOP senator is promising shock and awe from Trump in his first day or three. We'll see where that all goes. I'll give you the details of what we're expecting. In the third hour of the program, what is this AfD German party that Elon Musk is promoting? And Republicans who voted against preventing wildfires in California. And Gavin Newsom exposes Elon Musk's lies. So fascinating stuff, a lot to talk about today. I want to start out with the memo that hijacked American democracy and how Democrats can take it back. This is not, some brand new revelation, but it just doesn't get discussed anywhere near enough. And that is that during the last 50 years, while Democrats have been carefully trying to, do public policy and expand health care for people and expand educational programs and reduce student debt and reduce medical debt and clean up the environment and, basically provide for a good and positive future for ourselves and our world. Well, Democrats have been doing all that good stuff. And by the way, bailing Donald Trump out of his presidency by passing the American Rescue Plan and well, actually, I think that was in the first weeks of Biden's presidency, whatever it was called when it was Trump, getting money to people and just the whole thing. I mean, Democrats were at the lead of all of that. In fact, Republicans, by and large, voted against most of it. And not a single Republican voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, either in the House or the Senate, for example. So anyhow, while Democrats have been busy doing the people's business and trying to, keep the lights on and keep the government working, Republicans have been doing something quite different. They've been trying to consolidate their power. And they've been doing it through the age-old method of first seizing and then poisoning the channels of public information. Thomas Jefferson famously said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Well, Republicans are taking that to heart, right? It's an old script. I mean, it's been played out in Russia and Hungary most recently. Back in the 30s, we had other countries, Spain, Germany, Italy. But, want to seize control of a nation and turn it into a neo-fascist state with the consent of the people? Just take control of the channels of public information and news. And, like I said, over the past 50 years, while Democrats have been focusing on $35 insulin, Republicans have been focusing on buying and interacting with, creating a symbiotic relationship with right-wing media. And, I mean, this was not a secret that they were going to do this. This was the Powell Memo in 1971, Lewis Powell. Nixon put him on the Supreme Court the following year, where he started putting his plan into action by voting for the Bellotti, well, actually he wrote the Bellotti decision in 78. In 76, the, Buckley versus Vallejo decision he voted in favor of. And that began... And those two decisions said that money is free speech and corporations are persons, and therefore billionaires and big corporations can involve themselves in the political process, which prior to the 1970s was illegal. So that was 76 and 78, and what that did was it greased the skids, no pun intended, for the oil industry to just roll Ronald Reagan into the White House in 1980 on a tsunami of fossil fuel money. On top of the fact that Reagan conspired with the Ayatollah to hang on to the hostages to screw Jimmy Carter, something that somehow bizarrely never even got mentioned during Jimmy Carter's funeral, and it should have been mentioned every single hour. But anyhow, these details are rarely discussed, But nonetheless, Democrats need to know about this and they need to fight back. So first, Republicans realize that if they want to seize political power, they first have to seize public opinion. And then secondly, they realize that if they want to control the government, the Senate is the single most important thing. Well, actually, the judiciary is the single most important thing, but the way you control the judiciary is through control of the Senate. Now, how do you get control of the Senate? Well, it's part and parcel of how you get control of public opinion. And what they did was they started building out, first of all, they started buying radio stations all across America and local newspapers, particularly in low population states, because they knew if they could flip a bunch of low population states from Democratic to Republican, then the outcome of that would be that they could control the Senate. The Senate is, basically our anti-democratic, or it's the least democratic of our institutions. I mean, you got Wyoming with 800,000 people has the same 2 votes that California with 39 million people has. That is not small d democratic. So what they did was they started buying and building out radio and television stations across low population states, where it's very cheap to buy these stations, by the way. And the same with local newspapers. So in Wyoming, in Montana, in Iowa, and Nebraska, and Kansas, and Alabama, and Mississippi, and all of these relatively low population states or poor states where media is inexpensive. And by the way, this also happened in some of the larger states like Texas and Florida. They basically bought all the media. And in 2008, Air America had been broadcasting for 3 years, and in 2000, and frankly, the consensus was that it was Air America that helped get Barack Obama elected in 2008. We were on 57 stations in America. There was pretty much no place in America, and on big sticks, big stations that blew big signals statewide. In some cases, signals that would cover 2, 3, 4 states. So there was, it was fairly easy, pretty much anywhere in America, to tune into Air America and hear me or Al Franken or Randy Rhoads or, Sam Cedar or Janine Garofalo and, Mark Maron, et cetera. So in 2008, Bain Capital, Mitt Romney's company, bought Clear Channel because Mitt Romney had decided after John McCain lost in 2008, he decided he was going to run in 2012. So his company bought Clear Channel. All of our stations were Clear Channel stations, or at least 54 out of 57, I think, of them were Clear Channel stations. And over the next 2 years, till 2010, they just took us off the air, one after another. And the result, of course, was that it bankrupted Air America. They couldn't sell advertising if they didn't have any listeners. And that was the end of that. And thus, Republicans, now they've got 1,500 right-wing radio stations. They've got about 800 religious broadcasters, nonprofits on radio, who also constantly broadcast right-wing politics. They've got about 300 right-wing Spanish-language stations broadcasting politics. We saw the outcome of that in this last election with a big shift in the Hispanic vote toward Republicans and Donald Trump. They started buying newspapers. Rupert Murdoch bought the Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. Billionaire Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. A right-wing billionaire physician bought the Los Angeles Times. Right-wing hedge funds run by right-wing billionaires in New York City control about half of all the local newspapers in the United States. So basically, the entire media infrastructure shifted hard to the right. And along with that, the new media, which now accounts for, over 50%, 54% of Americans get all or some of their news from social media. X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, WhatsApp, all this stuff is owned by two right-wing billionaires now, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. And they've shifted to the right. So how do Democrats respond to this? Democrats need to be doing the same damn thing. They need to build out think tanks. Part of my article goes through all the Republican think tanks. and state policy centers. They need to be building out think tanks. They need to be buying and building out media and expanding existing media organizations. There are a bunch of smaller low power FM and smaller FM, smaller progressive stations. There's a whole network of them. Democrats should be supporting them. They should be supporting some of the stations. Basically, I think they should be supporting all of the stations that I'm on. If you can hear my voice, Democrats should be helping out the Democratic Party. Like the Republican billionaires support. I mean, the Heritage Foundation used to give Rush Limbaugh $2 million a year. They used to give Hannity $1 million a year back in the early days when these guys were still struggling. I mean, this did not happen organically. The Rush Limbaugh show didn't just appear. It was suddenly on 50-some-odd stations with really good funding and a big national footprint and a very, very competent PR firm. The guy who is our business manager was, involved in that rollout. This was no secret. This was big money coming in to put a right-wing voice on the air. Democrats need to wise up.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And if they don't, America is going to continue to drift to the hard right, and we may well see our democracy, or what's left of it, completely gone. And welcome back. Let's see what's on your mind here. Ray in Hollywood, California. Hey, Ray. Thanks for listening to KFBK. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm in the Los Angeles area, and I'm pretty well in the middle of these fires. I wondered if you would like to discuss this, or perhaps we can ask questions back and forth.
Yeah, no, go for it. What's up?
Well, the fire started the 7th, and the main criticism in the town here is the government was very slow to respond, and their response was ineffective. And this is the same criticism that we had from 1983 when there was another fire. Right now it's pretty bad. There's a problem with smoke inhalation. The city is being covered with smoke, and the people are losing their homes. There were some pretty bad decisions made. The Department of Water and Power cut off the water for the people that were trying to save their homes, using a garden hose and watering down their house. Well, the Department of Water and Power cut the water off, and they claim they did it because the fire was breaking the pipes and they were losing water. And I thought that was a pretty bad decision. What do you think?
I think that when houses catch on fire, I've actually watched this happen. I was a kid in Michigan, and we saw a house that was hit by lightning catch on fire. As the burning house collapsed, the copper pipes inside the house were both melting and breaking, and all through the house you could see just water spraying in every direction from those pipes. So if you've got a bunch of houses that are on fire, their pipes are going to be spraying water willy-nilly, and that's going to destroy your water pressure. So if you want your fire hydrants to work, which are on a separate system or can be separated from that system, then you've got to shut off the water to the residential houses. And, in a firestorm situation where you've got hurricane force winds blowing these kinds of embers, wetting your house down with a fire hose ain't going to do nothing. That you could get enough water on that house, or that it would stay any longer than 5 or 10 minutes, given how dry that air. That air was 5% relative humidity, Ray. If you soaked your house, it would be dry within 10 minutes. I mean, it's like putting a hairdryer on your hair after taking a shower. I think the fire department in the city did the right thing.
Well, one of the causes, too, was a claim that people were seeing the utility poles and the power lines broken in Altadena. In other words, there's a suspicion that the cause was the power lines broke and they sparked and they caused the fire in the northern Altadena area. And that's an area just north of Pasadena. People know that particular city. The other fire, the Palisades
Well, then you need to
fire,
talk to PG&E about that, because they should have shut off the power.
Hmm?
I said you need to talk to PG&E about that. They should have shut off the power. You know, when they didn't shut off the power in Paradise, which caused that entire city to burn down, they were charged with manslaughter. So if that's true, Ray, there are some major lawsuits coming. I can guarantee you that. Ray, I got to run, but, be careful of where you're getting your information. Thanks a lot for the call. It's 21 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So after the horrific school shooting in Tennessee, leaving 3 9-year-olds dead, as well as three adults, the Tennessee legislature has taken 2 very interesting steps. The first is they're moving to shield gun manufacturers and sellers from liability lawsuits. But even more interesting, the legislature has just passed a bill that sets up a statewide system where you can turn in teachers for teaching things that make children feel bad about themselves, specifically teaching white children that white people once enslaved black people. Seriously. Or teaching that, about the Holocaust, for example, that, white people in Germany killed Jews. This is apparently going to be not just outlawed in Tennessee, but there's a whole apparatus being set up right now so that you can turn in your neighbors. It's just incredible. There's a whole piece about it over at thom.tv, thom.tv. Check it out.
Every day's an opportunity to do something good in your family, in your community, in your...
And welcome back. 23 minutes past the hour. A Republican senator, this is the memo that hijacked American democracy I was just talking about just a moment ago. Now we go to, what the Republicans are planning as they move forward, given the power that they have, given this vast right-wing media machine that helped put them into power. This is John Barrasso, the Republican senator from Wyoming, who says that on day one, Donald Trump is going to hit America. Remember when, let me back up a little bit here. Remember when George W. Bush opened his attack on Iraq after he lied us into supporting a war against a country that had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11 and did not have weapons of mass destruction. He just wanted their oil, and got it, by the way, and sold it off to a bunch of other oil companies and saved Halliburton, Dick Cheney's company, from bankruptcy. But in any case, remember when he started just bombing the crap out of Baghdad first thing, and he called it his shock and awe campaign, where shock and awe is English for an old German strategy during World War II. But in any case, here's John Barrasso, and he says, when President Trump takes office next Monday, there's going to be a shock and awe with executive orders, a blizzard of executive orders on the economy as well as the border. And apparently he's going to close the U.S.-Mexican border. He's going to begin mass deportations. He's going to reverse Biden's clean energy policies. He's going to reverse our civil rights protections for the queer community. He's going to reverse whatever he can, civil rights protections for women and for racial minorities and religious minorities. And he intends to overwhelm the public and government and the media with all of these. So the media is going to be stuck. Oh, here's 100 executive orders. We can talk about 3 of them. Which 3 shall we pick? And so an awful lot of horrible stuff that Donald Trump is going to do on day one, particularly the stuff that requires a little bit of explanation, isn't even going to get discussed. But, he's going to use recess appointments to get people into office immediately, into his cabinet immediately, so that, he can hit the ground running. He's going to use impoundment. I'll give you details on that. He's probably going to break a lot of laws in the process, but he doesn't care because the Supreme Court says that, hey, if it's an official act, he's got immunity from prosecution. So impoundment is something that Thomas Jefferson was the first president to use. He withheld, Congress had appropriated money for ships, and he had withheld that money back in 1801. It was $50,000 for U.S. Navy gunboats because he wanted to reduce tension with France over New Orleans. The Louisiana Purchase made it a moot point, so Jefferson actually won that one. But then Nixon tried it. And Nixon was impounding funds that were for good social programs. He got sued before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. And then Congress passed an Impoundment Act, the Impoundment Control Act, that requires the president to get congressional approval before they impound or withhold money that Congress has appropriated. Well, Trump says he's going to do it anyway, and he doesn't care what the law says because the Supreme Court said that he's the king. And now, finally, we have Republicans gearing up for class warfare. I'll give you the details on that on the other side of the break, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. What's on your mind today? And just a reminder, the second hour of our program, Congressman Ro Khanna, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, will be with us for the whole hour, taking your calls in a national Progressive Townhall meeting.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And it looks like confirmation hearings are scheduled starting tomorrow. Pete Hegseth before the United States Senate. That's going to be an interesting show. Stay tuned. Our book today is America on Fire by Dr. Elizabeth Hinton. The subtitle, The Untold Story of Police Violence and Black Rebellion Since the 1960s. I'm reading from the introduction. On a cold Monday at the start of February, Joseph McNeil, Franklin McCain, Ezell Blair Jr., and David Richmond sat down at a whites-only lunch counter at Woolworth's in Greensboro, North Carolina. A waiter refused to serve the young men and suggested they order takeout instead. The four North Carolina A&T students remained at the counter. The store manager approached and asked them to leave. Still, they did not move. A police officer arrived, slapping his nightstick in his hand in an attempt to intimidate. Rather than allow the students' offense against Jim Crow to continue, the manager of the store closed the store for the day. 24 black students returned on Tuesday. Over 50 black students and 3 white students participated in the sit-in on the next day, Wednesday, February 3rd, 1960. News of the protests spread, and soon the sit-in movement had expanded to 55 cities and 13 states. By April, over 50,000 students were involved. Conceived and organized entirely by young people, the sit-in movement ultimately led to the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, SNCC, which was run by activists such as John Lewis and Stokely Carmichael. As a Fisk student, Lewis participated in the sit-ins in Nashville, Tennessee, and he would go on to steer the Freedom Riders in the summer of 1961 and speak at the March on Washington in 1963. Carmichael joined the sit-in movement as a high school student and would famously call for Black Power at the SNCC rally in Greenwood, Mississippi in 1966. Together, Lewis, Carmichael, and tens of thousands of other young black Americans signaled that their generation was prepared to risk their lives for freedom and equality. From Greensboro onward, the sit-ins helped build momentum and support for racial justice. The students in Greensboro engaged in a nonviolent protest to demand full integration, the right to vote, equal educational opportunities, decent jobs, protection against white supremacist terrorism, and an end to police violence. These were the central aims of the civil rights movement more broadly. By the end of the decade, black students at North Carolina A&T State University were still protesting, but now they were destroying property, assaulting police officers, and shooting in the direction of law enforcement, if not coming close to killing cops in self-defense. In May 1969, after black students at Greensboro's James B. Dudley High School were arrested, brutalized, and tear gassed by police,
During a series of protests against arbitrary disciplinary measures, A&T students came to the teenagers' defense. The confrontations between local police and black high school and college students led authorities to call the National Guard to A&T's campus, unleashing violence and repression that ended in the killing of sophomore Willie Grimes. A pivotal stop on the road to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, by the end of the decade, Greensboro was a site of sustained violence. It was far from unique in this regard. Between 1964 and 1972, but especially between 68 and 72, the United States endured internal violence on a scale not seen since the Civil War. Every major urban center in the country burned during those 8 years. Violence flared up not only in archetypal ghettos, including Harlem and Watts, and in majority black cities such as Detroit and Washington, D.C. It appeared in Greensboro, North Carolina, in Gary, Indiana, in Seattle, Washington, and countless places in between. Every city, small or large, where black residents lived in segregated, unequal conditions. In the North and the South, the East and the West, the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt, black people threw rocks and bottles at police, shot at them with rifles, smashed the windows of businesses and institutions, hurled firebombs, and plundered local stores. These events, what we commonly call riots, or what people who are to the left of center sometimes refer to as civil disturbances, caused hundreds of millions of dollars of property damage. Most immediately, they shaped the lives of the store owners whose businesses were destroyed, of the parents who lost their teenage sons to the police, and of the firefighters and cops who were harmed or killed. But ever since, Americans have been living in a nation and a national culture created in part by the extreme violence of the 1960s and the early 1970s. The aftershocks of that era have, at times, taken the form of mass violence to which all Americans have been witness. In Miami in 1980, in Los Angeles in 1992, in Cincinnati in 2001, and in more recent years, in Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore, Maryland, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. The enduring impact of the violence of the 60s and 70s has been felt more regularly and more acutely by black people in American cities who faced new policing practices that emerged under the banner of the war on crime. The routine stop and frisks that attacked people's dignity, the breaking up of community gatherings, the presence of armed, uniformed officers in the hallways of under-resourced public schools, and more. Such strategies help repress mass violence as a regular phenomenon, but they ironically made further riots inevitable. Those strategies remain in place today. The book, America on Fire. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
A plan was drawn, words on paper, and soon freedom was gone. A blueprint for power, controlled by the few. A nation's voice silenced, a sinister coup. They took the airwaves, the courts, the rules, turning democracy into a game for fools. The memo that hijacked democracy, a silent coup for the oligarchy. Media blocked, the truth suppressed, freedom's heart put to the test. But the fight's not over, it's not too late to turn the tide and reclaim our fate.
Yeah, it's all about the Powell memo. Oh, I thought we were going to continue. Anyhow, Republicans are gearing up for class war. Democrats warn that, there's a leaked Republican memo here. House Republicans intend to pursue massive cuts in Medicaid. Now, roughly 80 million people are covered by Medicaid. Medicaid is a single-payer system mostly for low-income people. It also covers seniors who are in hospice care or long-term care. It fills in a few cracks here and there for low-income people. Medicare, Medicaid does a lot of different things. It's available for disabled people of all ages. And what the Republicans are proposing to do is convert its funding structure from basically block grants to the states to a so-called per capita cap. In other words, there's a cap per person. So if you're really, if, for example, you've got a child with cerebral palsy, which can be very expensive, and they're on Medicaid, you're going to burn up the cap in a couple of weeks, and then you just don't get any more money. That kind of thing, right? That appears to be what they're talking about. What they're saying is, according to the House Budget Committee, this could save the government up to $900 billion, almost $1 trillion. Now, what are they going to do with that $1 trillion? This is part of the $4 or $5 trillion that they're planning in tax cuts for Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and, their friends, and Donald Trump. So, Edwin Park is a research professor at Georgetown University's School of Public Policy and the Center for Children and Families. He says these funding caps are typically designed to fail to keep pace with expected growth in healthcare costs in order to severely cut federal Medicare spending, with these cuts growing larger and larger over time. He says, moreover, the caps would also fail to account for any unexpected cost growth, such as from another public health emergency or a new costly drug therapy. He says these cuts would only help bankroll Trump's tax cuts for his billionaire friends and corporate interests. Now, this document also calls for, quote, equalizing Medicaid payments for able-bodied adults. That's a fancy way of saying if you can't get a job, let's say you live in, rural Kentucky or West Virginia or there's a lot of rural parts of America where there simply are no jobs. And if you live in one of those areas and you're on Medicaid because you can't find work and you'd have no income, they're going to cut off your Medicaid because you've got to have a job and it's got to pay a certain amount and you got to work a certain number of hours. So Park goes on to say, quote, as a result, these proposals would take away coverage and access from tens of millions of low-income children, families, seniors, people with disabilities, and others who rely on Medicaid. Moreover, because Medicaid is the largest source of federal funding for the states, it accounts for 56.1% of all federal money going to state budgets. These large cost shifts to states would also threaten deep, damaging budget cuts to other state programs, including K-12 education. So the Republicans get a twofer. They get to destroy the public school systems in America as well. The House policy menu, this is all, from this one leaked document out of the GOP, what they're going to be proposing as soon as Trump comes into office. It also proposes slashing temporary assistance for needy families, TANF, and federal nutrition assistance, food stamps. Repealing, quote, major Biden health rules, things that protect us, and eliminating renewable energy funding under the Inflation Reduction Act. So your subsidies for electric cars and things like that, building charging stations, all that kind of stuff that the fossil fuel industry hates is going to go away. Mike Levin, the Democrat from California, wrote in response, he says, this won't lower costs for Americans. These cuts would only help bankroll Trump's tax cuts for his billionaire friends. Senator Ron Wyden, my senator here, one of my senators here in Oregon, he says, and he's the top Democrat in the Senate Finance Committee, he says this leaked policy shows that Republicans are gearing up for a class war against everyday Americans. He adds, this list outlines a plan to increase child hunger, boot tens of millions off their health insurance, lay off hundreds of thousands of clean energy workers to fund tax cuts for the wealthy. It won't be any consolation to struggling Americans that their hardship allows some rich buddy of Donald Trump to buy a bigger yacht. And here we go. It's about to start. So what's on your mind? Picking up your calls here. Marty in Wixom, Michigan. Hey, Marty. Happy Monday. What's up?
Hey, Tom. My comment today definitely relates to that topic of class warfare. The subject I'd like to raise relates to how Democrats might be able to stop what I think is arguably the biggest long-term destructive move that Trump tends to pursue, and that is that proposed extension of his multi-trillion-dollar tax cut, overwhelmingly benefiting the billionaires and large corporations.
Right.
Because that's the lever they'll use to lead to excuse the cuts in Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and so forth. The good news is that polls show that the public overwhelmingly doesn't like those tax cuts for the rich. 70 to 80% oppose those. So with a slim Republican majority, it would seem possible to prevent them from passing that, even in reconciliation, if enough visibility can be put on that issue. So my suggestion is that Democrats should prepare now and have ready to run TV and social media advertisements in the districts of potentially vulnerable Republican congressmen to inform people of that impending terrible giveaway and urge them to call their congressperson to oppose any such legislation.
I agree entirely.
I would think it'd be possible to make that issue so radioactive that they couldn't get enough Republican votes to pass it.
Well, what they're going to do, my prediction is they will either pass it through reconciliation, so they don't need a single a Democratic vote and it can't be filibustered, and then it'll just be a giant screw you and it'll be a one-day story. Or they're going to attach it to must-pass legislation.
Well, I think if they did my strategy, which is to get out front with these ads, have people call their legislators, I think there's enough Republicans that could be dissuaded because that would be so radioactive.
Yeah, we'll see. But
I'm wondering,
wait until they attach it to funding. Wait until they attach it to disaster funding for California.
I hope not. Well, could you ask the congressman about that strategy when you have him on the show later today?
Sure. I mean, I'll try to remember. I'm guessing if I don't, somebody else will, Marty. Well, and in fact, you know, we suspend the one call a week rule for when members of Congress are on. So, you know, you're welcome to call back next hour and ask him yourself.
I may try to do that if I can. Thank you.
Good luck, Marty. Thank you. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, not too much, Tom. Look, you already said the Supreme Court made Trump king, and you mentioned the Powell memo. But along that, I just want to add to that. Look, there was an attorney. She's certainly not a Trump supporter, but she was saying on Jack Smith's classified documents case, basically, elections have consequences, all right? Trump, like it or not, is the president-elect, and the president is in charge of all that sort of thing. It's all executive order. Most of those executive orders came out under Reagan, too, by the way. But check this out. Look, there was a Chicago cop that killed his wife, right? And he's in prison. I think it's Drew Peters was his name, maybe, if I remember correctly. Cops don't get speeding tickets when they're in a squad car. It's special immunity, right? Qualified immunity.
Right.
Now, the president is in charge of all the classified documents, all the protection of our nation's classified information. How can that president just be allowed to ignore it? Just like, I mean, is it possible Drew Peters thought, look, as a cop, I can kill people. Why can't I just kill my wife? And I wonder, related to...
You're conflating a bunch of stuff that don't belong in the same category, Dave. Cops can speed, technically breaking the law, because that's part of their job. It has nothing to do with qualified immunity. Qualified immunity kicks in when cops are accused of particular types of violence against civilians that limits. You can sue the city, but you can't sue the cop himself, generally speaking. I mean, there's all kinds of variations, but those are apples and oranges.
Well, and look, I don't know if you've seen the miniseries Shogun or not, but I would recommend. Well, you need to check it out, and this isn't a spoiler because I'm not all the way through it. But there was a scene where, all the information they were getting, the Japanese at the time, from the outside world, were coming from Catholic Spaniards, right?
Was this in the 19th century?
Yeah,
It's
it's about the Shogun period. It's just another Shogun epic drama. But the thing is or period drama. But the thing is it's apropos to what Trump and Republicans are trying to do. All the information they were getting was from the Spanish Catholics, right, on the outside world. That's what the Japanese were getting.
So this
they
is
were
before Admiral Perry's ships arrived?
Yeah, it's Blackthorne, John Blackthorne, who's British, right?
Yeah.
And they were trying to figure out why the Portuguese, who they really trusted, wanted this one Englishman, this one stranded Englishman killed. And why wouldn't they do it themselves? Why did they want the Japanese to do it? One guy in particular was interested in that. So he asked Blackthorne to draw a map of the world as he understands it. He drew the map of the world. This was at the court of this one warlord, right? He drew the map of the world, and he pointed where England was, and then he pointed where Japan was. And he said, well, why are you so far from home? And he said, because the Spanish and the Portuguese have divided the world into two, and they keep these corridors, these trade corridors
So
secret.
your point in a couple of seconds here, Dave.
Yes, the whole court was in shock, and the bottom line is why do we have a president? Why don't the Trumpers, if they want a king,
just... to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Sorry, Dave. 47 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Brandon in San Jose, California. Hey, Brandon, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing?
I'm well. What's up?
Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to recommend in light of what's going on in California, your book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
It's a fantastic book, by the way.
Thank you.
And, you're just a great writer. But what I wanted to call about is this sentencing of Donald Trump recently in Manhattan by Judge Juan Merchan.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that is, I think, first of all, I couldn't even listen to Donald Trump listening. I listened to the whole thing, but I kind of tuned out what Donald Trump was saying because he's so ignorant and stupid and narcissistic so it's insufferable to even listen to him talk. I just wanted to listen to Judge Juan Merchan and his reasoning for the sentencing of unconditional unconditional release or something like that?
Yeah, I forget the exact phrase, but yeah, you get off scot-free, basically.
Unconditional discharge, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it was very sound reasoning. One of the things that stuck out to me was where he basically said, he said it's the office of the presidency that is extraordinary, not the occupant.
Right.
Not the president himself, or something like that.
Yeah.
Basically telling Donald Trump that he's not special and, go F yourself, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought was great. Yeah, it was awesome. But, one of the things that I think the Democrats should I think they should use this as a cudgel to bring it up over and over again. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. He's not, as the judge said, he's not special. He doesn't have a what is called a mandate. He only won by 1.5 million votes or something like that. The margin of victory was even smaller than Hillary's victory, almost half that of Hillary's in 2016. Correct?
With the popular vote, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that they need to bring that up over and over again, and especially when it comes to things like this mass deportation programs. which I think I've told you that that's one of the issues that I'm most concerned about, being a Latin American and having a pretty extensive Latin American family.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you have your citizenship papers in order, Brandon?
I do. I have my birth certificate. I have my ID and all that stuff.
Good, because it looks like they're going to start going house to house looking for brown people.
Well, I'm not brown. I do have a Hispanic last name.
Yeah.
So that's the main issue.
That may be close enough for some of these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful. But I don't know. I have a feeling that they're not going to be able to get away with too much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I keep telling myself that, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Okay,
yeah.
Brandon, thank you very much for the call. Spot on.
Right.
And we will see how this all plays out. I think it's going to be rather grim, but anyhow. Just a reminder, on the other side of the break, Congressman Ro Khanna will be with us for the hour, taking your calls. We're in a National Progressive Townhall meeting. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. People in the Rust Belt states know all about tariffs. They know that tariffs kept jobs in the Rust Belt states for centuries, literally, that America was built on tariffs. It's one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected in 2016 was because he talked about tariffs. But for some reason right now, the Harris-Walz campaign, or Democrats in general, are reluctant to talk about tariffs. They call them sales taxes or something like that. They really need to be a little more straightforward because people, particularly in the industrial Midwest, or in the Rust Belt, as we call it now, are not dumb. They know what's going on. They know where we've been and how we got here. And I think it's pretty important to be talking about tariffs and what they are, how they work, and how they can bring manufacturing back home. I wrote a piece about it for Hartmann Report. It's titled, Why Trump is Wrong and Alexander Hamilton Was Right About Tariffs. And I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating at hartmannreport.com. Check it out.
I hear the chatter, I see
the hour and picking up your calls here. Let's see. Dave in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Thanks, Tom. About AM/FM radio, 8 car companies, BMW, Ford, Mazda, Polestar, Rivian, Tesla, Volkswagen, Volvo, has said that they're going to stop AM radio. And some of the companies said that the signal of AM gets distorted with the electric engines. And I was wondering, you had brought up FM radio earlier, and I know the signal is different. And the overall general sense of AM/FM radio, because Sirius doesn't consider it a radio station, it considers itself a podcast station, I guess, and in the future, and so many other people have podcasts and broadcast those, and I was just sort of wondering what your overall thought of the future of AM/FM radio and being in the cars in the future.
Yeah, interesting. I have not heard that the electric motors or the electronic systems in electric cars mess with AM radio. I've not experienced that.
Signal's different.
Yeah, well, AM and FM signals are different. AM is amplitude modulation, and if you've got static in the band or on the frequency, it will pick that up and it'll play as static. FM is frequency modulation. Static is a form of amplitude modulation. So by modulating the frequency, by varying the frequency, you filter out any possibility of static. So that's why FM sounds so good. It also has a wider bandwidth because it's at a higher frequency, which can sustain wider bandwidths. Although it's typically pretty much line of sight, whereas AM can even bounce across the horizon. But in any case, I think the big challenge to this is going to be Congress. And I know that the Republicans have
twice tried to pass legislation mandating AM radio in cars, and and they haven't been successful. And I'm guessing that will be one of their first orders of business in the new year, or this new year, in the next couple of weeks. And in which case, all those car companies are going to have to pull back and reincorporate AM radios into their cars. We'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. But they're doing everything they can to try to protect.
So you see a future in AM/FM radio and broadcasting shows like yourself?
Well, I'm on some AM stations. I'm also on a lot of FM stations. I think that an awful lot of progressive talk radio is moving to FM. So a lot of talk radio in general is moving to FM. Dave, thanks for the call. Ann in Austin. Hey, Ann, you got a quick one? I got about a minute left here.
Yes, sure. Tom, to drill down on your thoughts about the worldwide fascist movement, I'd like to propose that Musk may be the next Hitler after becoming the richest man in the world and striving to control the political narrative via social media. His insatiable appetite for power is in need of a grander infusion. His plan is already underway. He's seeking control of the European continent by bankrolling the far-right populist neo-Nazi candidates in UK, Italy, and Germany whom he can control. And as I see it, he's also seeking control of the North American continent by bankrolling Trump into the presidency and pushing the MAGA agenda. Yeah. He's using Trump to amass power over the U.S. and aiming to spread MAGA into Canada and critically go after Greenland as the coupler, if you will, connecting the two continents politically.
I agree. And I'll be discussing that in greater detail in the third hour of the program. In fact, at the opening of the third hour of the program. But, I wouldn't characterize it using the exact same words that you are. But certainly Elon Musk has international ambitions. That's very obvious. And thank you for the call. Up next, Congressman Ro Khanna for the entire hour, taking your calls in a national Progressive Townhall meeting. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Brainwashing of My Dad, How the Rise of the Right-Wing Media Changed a Father and Divided Our Nation and How We Can Fight Back by Jen Senko. This is from Chapter 6, How Talk Radio Hijacked My Dad. In 1984, Reagan was reelected in a landslide victory against liberal Democrat Walter Mondale. That year was also when everything began to change for my dad and our family. In 1984, Dad retired from his job with the federal government at age 62. Both my parents missed being near the shore, so they moved back to New Jersey and settled in Toms River, a town where there was a large retired population. Still energetic, my father got a part-time engineering job 3 or 4 days a week, necessitating a long solo commute by car. He didn't want to waste time on music while driving. He wanted to be stimulated mentally, and he discovered talk radio to keep himself company. At the time, Bob Grant was the dominant talk radio personality. Often called the conservative radio, Grant was an openly racist, sexist, far-right shock jock. On his WABC radio show, he referred to blacks and Hispanics as savages. He believed them to be inferior, and he once even called Martin Luther King Jr. a slimeball. With his combative and testy style, he was considered a pioneer of the talk radio format. Soon, Grant became my dad's commuting buddy. I didn't know Bob Grant from Joe Namath, but I did know I didn't care for his style of yelling at callers or hanging up on them if they disagreed with him. My mother was not a fan of Grant's either, and she delighted in telling me the story of how she ran into him one day. She was at the Ocean County Mall eatery, sitting at a table having lunch when she saw Grant walk in. She recognized him, and when he passed her table, she asked, "You're Bob Grant, aren't you?" He said, "Yes, I am." She said, "Oh, my husband likes you, but I don't." He had been walking away and turned to look back at my mother and gave a little laugh. She said she just sat there at the table and did not smile back. Gradually, it seemed my dad started becoming more agitated after listening to Bob Grant. Eventually, he became consistently more irritable, excitable, and easy to anger. Little did we know, a metamorphosis was beginning. Along with massive deregulation in the communications industry, there were several other factors that led to talk radio's explosion of popularity in the 1980s. The first was that music had moved from the AM dial to the high-fidelity sound of FM, and thus left a void on the AM dial. Broadcasters realized that filling that blank airspace with mainstream news wouldn't make much money. However, entertainment made money, and talk radio was entertainment at its finest, even when it masqueraded as news coverage. Human conversation didn't benefit from high-fidelity sound the way music did, so talk radio filled the void on the AM radio waves perfectly. The second contributor to talk radio's rise was the new accessibility of satellite technology, allowing anyone to broadcast a show nationally. And the third was the fact that when 1-800 numbers became available, you could have callers call in from all over the country. These factors combined to make a pretty powerful storm. The format of talk radio was, of course, not new. The format first debuted in the 1920s, continuing with Father Charles Coughlin's controversial and anti-Semitic radio broadcasts in the 1930s. Coughlin has often been referred to as the father of hate radio, and he paved the way for all that has come in his medium. Many of the most famous conservative talk radio personalities modeled themselves after the 1950s sensation Joe Pine. His show, It's Your Nickel, consisted of Pine debating his opinions with people calling in. Calls often culminated with him insulting the caller, to the delight of his audience. The format of talk radio evolved from there, but many of the most popular shows and hosts, including Bob Grant, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and Glenn Beck, have stuck with the confrontational tone and high-emotion interactions that these early hosts introduced. There haven't been many successful liberal talk radio hosts. Ed Schultz, Randy Rhoads, and Alan Colmes tried to make inroads, but simply failed to draw a large audience, in quotes. You may wonder why conservative talk radio programs have been so phenomenally popular while equivalent liberal shows have foundered. Aside from big money to support it, the secret seems to lie in the inflammatory approach favored by these so-called conservative hosts. Abram Brown of Forbes says of liberal talk radio shows, it's not the same thing as a Limbaugh or a Hannity. It's more general, not really railing against the system. No one's yelling, we need to get rid of the Republicans. They're the worst thing that happened in this country. But you'll hear conservative radio hosts say that about liberals on their programs. Brown makes another good point that speaks to that. Tell your audience that the mainstream media is corrupt and biased, that there's more than that there's all the more reason to turn to your conservative talk radio to get the truth. Anger is a hot commodity. Finding an enemy is even hotter. Or as Ailes might say, it's the emotions, stupid. He did not actually say that. A little-known but very chilling example of how powerfully influential radio can be is the 1994 Rwandan genocide, where an estimated 800,000 citizens were brutally murdered by their fellow citizens, the Hutus. This happened after an intense radio campaign that started in 1993 dehumanized and demonized one group, the Tutsis. Militia groups were formed, and police and soldiers joined them in the killing. Samantha Power, who later served as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said killers often carried a machete in one hand and a transistor radio in the other hand. Dad discovers Rush Limbaugh. About a year after working part-time in his long commute, my dad officially retired. The book, The Brainwashing of My Dad, by Jen Senko.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. On the line with us is our buddy Congressman Ro Khanna, who represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives, the Silicon Valley area, and is the vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. His website is khanna.house.gov, and over on Blue Sky, Rep. Ro Khanna, R.O. Khanna. And Congressman, welcome back to the program. And Happy New Year, by the way. I think it's the first time we've talked this year. What's on your mind today?
The fires have been on my mind in California. I was back home in California. My district is up north, so we haven't been affected, but a lot of constituents have family and friends whose houses burned down. I mean, it's just a really tragic, devastating situation, and it's going to take a whole of state and country effort to rebuild LA, the surrounding areas and Palisades and beyond.
Yeah, it's. I'm curious your thoughts on how Donald Trump and this massive right-wing media machine right now are trying to blame every little aspect of the fires on principally Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. My guess is that they're trying to neuter Gavin Newsom of his potential to run for president in 4 years or 3.5 years.
Well, it's awful to politicize the tragedy. I mean, look, the response should be like Governor Abbott, who is the governor of Texas, a Republican. He said, I'm going to be sending firefighters to L.A., and our thoughts and prayers are with California. Usually in times of national crisis is one of the few times that people come together, and there's plenty of time for politics. And if they were asking these questions, as some of them being illegitimate 2-3 months from now, that's one thing. But while people are still trying to contain these fires, while people are watching still today their property or housing burned, for them to be distracting is just awful. It's not what we are supposed to be as Americans.
There also was a leaked document this morning from the House Republicans suggesting that they want to cut Medicaid, which currently aids about 80 million people, that they want to turn it into a program where it's a per capita cap. So if somebody's really expensive, a child with cerebral palsy or something, they burn through that cap very, very quickly. They also want to cut back, use this as, let's see, who said this? Edwin Park, a research professor at Georgetown University's School of Public Policy, he says this is designed to fail to keep pace with expected growth in healthcare costs in order to severely cut federal Medicaid spending, with these cuts growing larger and larger over time. Moreover, the caps would fail to account for any unexpected cost growth, such as public health emergencies or costly drug therapies. The cuts would only help bankroll Trump's tax cuts for his billionaire friends. Do you think this is going to work? They're going after Medicare now, apparently.
Well, it's inhumane, but look, Tommy, you've made this point. If you care about the deficits in this country, the reality is that spending has either stayed flat, in some cases actually gone down in terms of a percent of GDP over the last 10 years. Yeah. So what has happened? We've just given tax breaks to the very wealthy. That is why we have these deficits. What does the Republicans want to do? They want to give more tax breaks to the very wealthy. and they don't want to add to the deficit. So what does that mean? They're going to have to further cut programs that have been flatlined for a decade. And this means cuts in Medicare. It could mean cuts in Social Security. It means cuts in the Department of Education. But, you know, the one thing that you've got listeners all over the country that we need to push back strongly is this idea that federal spending has somehow gone up. It's just not factually true. What has happened is massive tax breaks for the very wealthy.
Yeah, I got it. All right, let's pick up some phone calls here. Wayne in Philadelphia, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, how you doing, Tom and Congressman Khanna? So, we know what the Republicans want to do. All the cuts there in Medicare. We know they're going to cut all these programs because they got to get a tax cut. They do it every time. What is the Democrats' response? And I hope the Democrats' response is we're going to work with the criminal where we can. When I call him the criminal, that's what I call him, because that's what he is, convicted felon. What is the Democrats' response going to be? Right now, the response that I'm seeing from the Democrats is Chuck Schumer, nothing. Hakeem Jeffries, nothing. Dick Durbin, nothing. What is your response going to be? I hope it's not the Neville Chamberlain response.
Well, I can assure you it won't be the Neville Chamberlain response. Hakeem gave a speech when he handed over the gavel saying very clearly the Democrats will fight with every fiber for being against cuts on Social Security, cuts on Medicare, cuts on Department of Education that help working and middle-class people. I believe you will have a unified Democratic Party. I mean, I'm a progressive Democrat, but this isn't just going to be a fight that is progressive Democrats. I think you will have all 215 members of our caucus strongly oppose these tax breaks to the very wealthy on the back of the working and middle class. The last time Donald Trump tried one of these things in 2017, it was wildly unpopular, and I expect that it's going to be wildly unpopular again because of the policy. I mean, it's helping the people who already have extraordinary wealth at the expense of the folks who are having rough out there, the working and middle class.
If I could ask a follow-up to that, you know, we've seen a Republican strategy where you've got Democrats and Republicans having relatively equal numbers, where the billionaire donors or people affiliated with the Republican Party will reach out to a couple of what they consider to be vulnerable Democrats and spiff the hell out of them, you know, give them all kinds of benefits to get them on their side. We saw this with the payoffs to Kyrsten Sinema, for example, and Joe Manchin. And that, you know, prevented us from getting the For the People Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It's looking to me like they're now reaching out to massage John Fetterman, and he might be amenable to that sort of ego-stroking or financial support. Are you concerned about this?
Well, when I criticized Senator Kyrsten Sinema, people said, "Bro, what are you doing? She could be a senator for many years." And turns out that money is not enough. Kyrsten Sinema didn't run for re-election because she would have gotten destroyed. And Ruben Gallego is the new senator. So I think it's a cautionary tale for any Democrat who may want to cooperate within a Trump agenda that's going to hurt working class or middle class families or compromise their values. Now, I've known Senator Fetterman a long time. We worked together on Bernie Sanders' campaign. I still believe that he has an economic populism in him, and even places where we haven't seen eye to eye on the Middle East or on immigration, I would be shocked and do not think he would compromise when it comes to tax breaks for the very wealthy. I mean, he's always been an economic populist. But in terms of your broader point, we have to be vigilant about it.
Yeah, thank you. Michael in Gainesville, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, hello, Congressman Khan. I think you're the reason, and progressives are the reason Trump won, and I'm Democrats, so I'm very sad to say that, but for 70 years, every time a child has been born, that child has been probabilistically going to be less well off than the parent for 70 years, and that's under both Republican and Democrat purveyance. And I think the people went for the wild card. And I know you can't automatically just say, okay, next year everything will be, this will be the 71st year, things will be better. But the things you're not saying is why we're in this situation. You're not saying that you're going to do a full Bernie and healthcare is a human right, or that we've got 2 genocides, one in Yemen and one in Gaza. You're not screaming that from the mountaintops, and you're supposedly the progressive, and that's why Trump won, because we know the others are crooked and will not serve the populist people and will let us just, at least in Rome, they gave you bread in a Colosseum. Now, both Democrats and Republicans are basically doing a lot of talking, but they're both rationing bread, and it's just enough. That's why Trump exists. He made you.
Let's get the response. You've made your point.
Well, look, I backed Bernie Sanders in 2016. I spent 2 years of my life campaigning all over for him as his co-chair in 2020. I have done videos every week on Medicare for All and the denials by health insurance companies, what they're doing in terms of the costs on the public, the people who are going without health care. I agree with you that we've had an economy that has concentrated wealth in the hands of a few because of shareholder buybacks, because of huge executive stock compensation, and it has led to stagnation for 40, 50 years of the working and middle class. And we've been pushing a bold progressive agenda in the House and with Bernie Sanders, and we will continue to do that. Obviously, we couldn't get Bernie over the line, but that doesn't mean that we're not trying our hearts out to stand up for these values.
Ray in Springfield, Oregon, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hey, good morning. Listen, the decision by the Supreme Court to give immunity to the president for anything he does or whatever. But let's say he does he issues an order that is arguably illegal. Are the people who carry out those orders, are they subject to being prosecuted?
Right, it's a great question. I have often joked that we don't put American presidents in jail in this country, but we often put everyone around them in jail. So there is some check on functionaries around him if it's something that's blatantly wrong. And look, I strongly disagreed with the Supreme Court opinion, and there should be criminal liability for a president if he does things that are grossly illegal. But the problem, in my view, is not the court's decision. The problem is, do we have Republicans, members of Congress in the House and Senate, willing to stand up to him if he does things that are illegal? Because there is a political remedy for that. It's called impeachment. It's called asking someone to resign. And in my view, I put more blame on the cowardice in the Republican Party to check Donald Trump, what the founders envisioned as a checks and balances, than on that Supreme Court decision, though I disagree with that.
There you go. Congressman Ro Khanna, Vice Chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour in a Progressive National Town Hall meeting. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can find Congressman Khanna's website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can find him over on Blue Sky at Rep. Ro Khanna. And welcome back. Robert in Winston, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Good morning, gentlemen. My question is very simple. With the LA fires going on, they are eventually going to go out. And with all the building and all the labor necessary between picking crops and rebuilding, and if Trump's policies go through, where are they going to find the labor to rebuild these places?
Robin, it's a fair question. I mean, look, we first are going to need federal resources to help rebuild. And the California delegation, of which I'm a part, is going to do everything we can to get these resources. It's unprecedented for a president to deny resources when an American city is decimated, as we've seen with these fires. But we first have to get the resources. But then your second point is, how are we going to build it and build it fast? And that is going to require labor. Many of them are going to be people who are Americans, but many of them are going to be people who have been in this country for many, many years as part of construction. And if Trump starts to have the mass deportation of some of these workers, that's going to slow down the rebuilding and hurt the economy. So it's going to be a challenge to rebuild with Donald Trump there. Now, the governor has invited Donald Trump to just come and to talk to the residents, and he should take him up on that.
Keno in Lakeland, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yes, Happy New Year to us all. And Congressman, there's been a lot of talk this morning about the Supreme Court changed the rules or said that the president can almost be like a king now. He's not subject to the rule of law. I want to encourage you and the Democrats there could be legislation. I don't know if it would be an act of Congress or it would need to be a constitutional amendment, but something can be done, surely, to state specifically in writing that the president of the United States will be subject to the rule of law and will not be a regression to a king like we got away from 200 years ago. So and have it ready to talk about. Could I encourage you, is it not possible to get a group of Democrats to get it written up, get it ready, even if it's a constitutional amendment, and say, all right, when Trump starts doing all these criminal acts, we have legislation ready to put in place, and that could be one basis for the elections in 2 years. What do you think of this?
I think it's a great idea. I'll talk to Jamie Raskin, who's going to be our lead in the judiciary. The Supreme Court left a lot open. They said, okay, if someone commits as president a blatant murder, a friend or a family, they can be prosecuted, but basically they're immune for any official act. Well, what if you order someone's killing? What if you order someone to be investigated? So there is a large gray area in the court's decision, and I think having legislation clarify that you can't have blatantly criminal conduct, even if it's in your official act. Let me give you a case. I can't have someone say, okay, I'm going to give you $1 million, Ro, and go vote a certain way. That would be an official act, but it's clearly a bribe, and I'd belong in jail. I mean, Menendez was prosecuted for that. So similarly, we've got to say that official acts that are criminal can be prosecuted for the president, and I'll talk to Raskin about it.
Good on you. 22 minutes past the hour. Congressman Ro Khanna with us, taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for Representative Khanna, who you can find at khanna.house.gov or Rep. Ro Khanna over on Blue Sky in just 60 seconds. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 24 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls for Congressman Ro Khanna. Blue in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, nice to talk to you both. Congressperson, I called before and I asked if you could talk to somebody about putting heart rate variability biofeedback devices with little chairs in public places, because they're like fight or flight detectors. Did you talk to anybody about that?
Remind me of this exactly.
What are you talking about, Blue?
Well, it's a technical little device. It's not BPM. It's not beats per minute. It's a different measurement of your heart rate. But what it would do is it would spread awareness if you put these devices with a little chair so people could sit down. It would spread awareness about the difference between the parasympathetic nerves and the sympathetic nerves. and how anybody can control that. They can control whether they're in fight or flight or not just by feeling what's going on inside of them.
Okay. Congressman?
Well, if you send me an email, I'm happy to look into it. I don't know if it's something that would help just health safety or if it's something else, but you can go on my website and email me, and I will take a look.
It seems more like the kind of thing a wellness company might want to be selling. Mayor in Santa Fe, New Mexico, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. Two things I have. Tom, I don't know if you saw that there was a commercial that had your voice on it that was promoting that Medicare Advantage. That was really weird.
Really?
Because I know you're against it. Yes.
Where did you hear this?
On your show, on a commercial.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Which station?
103.7. It's KPRC in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay, I'll have to ask him what's going on with that. Keep going.
Yeah, that freaked us out. We were like, oh no, not Tom too.
Yeah.
But then, Representative Khanna, I have a thought that I wanted to run by you. I don't know if you can even speak to this or
we just have a few seconds, so right to it, Mayor.
Yeah. Do you think that Putin is behind whispering in Trump's ear about grabbing land, Greenland, Canada, the Gulf of Mexico? Is this a Putin plot to expand empire?
Or to legitimize what Putin's doing with Ukraine?
Well, look, I think Trump is surrounded by people who simply look at material acquisition and wealth as their North Star. And they have forgotten what makes America truly remarkable is our commitment from Woodrow Wilson to FDR to self-determination. And my grandfather spent 4 years in jail alongside Gandhi fighting for India's independence, and it was FDR who pushed Churchill and the British to decolonize. And now in sort of a quest for their abandoning the very principles of America. Now, I don't think it'll succeed, but just that they're contemplating it.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Do you want to finish the thought? 10 seconds?
Just the contemplation of it suggests that we're unrooted from principle. I mean, we as Americans don't go just conquer land or try to acquire things because of
I'm sorry,
material
we're out of time. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified, we have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Liddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a Lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. And that's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home, a temple to the new India, or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about this most expensive dwelling ever built, the 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles, clearly trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati Roy goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism, a ghost story by Arundhati Roy.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. They called it blood libel, what the Germans were doing against the Jews, claiming that they were using the blood of Christian children to make their matzah. We've got a new blood libel now here in the United States. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump lying through their teeth, arguing that black Haitian immigrants to the United States, legal immigrants with green cards in this little town in Ohio, are eating pets. This is another libel that goes way back. In the 1890s, people were claiming German and Dutch immigrants were eating pets. Then they claimed in the 1880s, and actually as recently as last year, a restaurant got shut down in California because of claims that they were serving pets. They weren't. But it was an Asian restaurant. This is just evil stuff, these lies and spreading this kind of hate. And this is now the strategy that the Republicans are using. There's a whole article about it at HartmannReport.com, Hate as a Political Weapon. Check it out. And welcome back. 35 minutes past the hour. Congressman Ro Khanna with us for the hour, taking your calls in a National Progressive Townhall meeting. Marty in Wixom, Michigan, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hi, Tom and Representative Khanna. And thanks, Tom, for letting me ask this question directly to the Congressman. My question relates to what I think is arguably the biggest destructive move that Trump intends to pursue because of its long-term effects on the federal budget. And that is his proposed extension of the multi-trillion-dollar tax cut, overwhelmingly benefiting billionaires and large corporations. That will inevitably lead to pressure to cut things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and so forth. Now, the good news is that polls show that the public overwhelmingly doesn't like those tax cuts for the rich. So with a very slim Republican majority, it would seem possible to prevent them from passing that, even in reconciliation, if enough visibility is put on that issue. So my question is, could the Democrats prepare now and have ready to run on TV and social media advertisements in the districts of potentially vulnerable Republican congressmen to inform people of this impending terrible giveaway to the rich and urge them to call their congressperson to oppose any such legislation? I would think it'd be possible to make the issue so radioactive that they couldn't get enough Republican votes to pass it. What do you think, Representative?
Well, I appreciate your strategic sense. I do think being aggressive and potentially running ads on it makes sense, put people on notice. Unfortunately, the one thing I've noticed in my 8 years in Congress is Republicans almost always vote for any tax break for the rich. It's sort of in their DNA. But putting them on the defensive and letting them know that this is where we're going to prosecute the case is good strategy.
Kelly in Kingman, Arizona, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Thank you, Tom and Congressman Khanna. My question is wrapped up in something that we all know. We all know that foreign enemies are meddling in our social media and influencing people. But what we never hear is anybody in our leadership or in the government telling us that every single day, reminding people. And I try to tell people, and they go, well, why doesn't anybody in the government say anything? That's my question, Congressman.
Well, we have spoken out about the risks of foreign interference. Obviously, there was a whole sense with what Putin was doing in Russia and the infiltration of the Trump campaign. I mean, Trump was impeached over it. There was a concern about infiltration on social media by the Chinese Communist Party. But we need to continue to make sure that we're speaking out against foreign interference and also foreign election spending in the American political process.
Let's see. Oh, sorry. Bradley in Northport, Michigan. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Sort of piggybacking on an earlier call in regard to the upcoming tax bill that they're just chomping at the bit to get done. The earlier tax bill that Trump had done, were there absolutely any loopholes that were closed? And with the upcoming bill, is there any way that you can get proactive to make sure that some of those do get closed and identified, because they wouldn't be called loopholes if they didn't exist? So I'm certainly not making use of them. I work every day and should be retired, but certainly am not. So I wish that would be addressed, and thank you.
Well, unfortunately, they didn't close any loopholes last time. I mean, they had a minimum tax on foreign earnings, but that was 10%, whereas In the United States, it's at 21%. So it's still a huge incentive to offshore jobs. The biggest thing we could do is to raise that foreign tax to at least 21% so that you don't have an incentive for companies to go to Mexico or China or India just to avoid taxation. And then close the loophole for carried interest, where people are making money on management fees and it's not getting taxed at ordinary income. So there are a lot of loopholes that we could close, but the Republicans and Trump had no interest in closing them.
Carolyn, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. You are on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Hello, Tom, and hello, Representative Khanna. And Representative Khanna, I just want to say you're amazing. I appreciate when you're on here. It's just being able to talk to you, and I know your work. I actually represent a group, independent voters, and we have Democrats, too, in our group throughout the United States. I just wanted to mention that. Tom already knows it. But my first thing, Tom, for you, I also saw on my channel 269, Dish TV, a Medicare Advantage commercial. So I wanted you to know that.
Okay.
I was shocked, too, just like that lady from Mexico.
It wasn't voiced by me, though, was it, Carol?
No.
Okay.
No, it was.
I don't know how that
happens. No, it was not.
No,
it was not. But I just want to let you know, I thought Tom would never, I immediately thought Tom would never do that, you know. But anyway, so my first question was, I just have two real quick ones. Representative Khanna, if you could tell us, again, I'm the selected spokesperson, if you could tell us, can we, like when Sinema decided to become a Republican, can you tell me if we can impeach as voters when we voted them in as, and I'm not from that state, but some of my members are, you know, Arizona, anyway, she got voted in as a Democrat, but then she decided, along with Manchin, to do the critical vote having to do with about voting down the Lewis voting rights bill. Anyway, so can we impeach? Is there mechanisms for us to put in place besides phone calls or whatever, to have the person impeach when they turncoat? That's my first question. And the second one is if you could. The second one really quick is, and then I'll get off the air, is the 25th Amendment enacted. I know it's there, but I want to know where's that? Is that in the Judicial Committee? They would enact that to remove the oathbreaker insurrectionist and repeat number two.
Let's get an answer here.
Well, unfortunately, there is no recourse when someone is elected to the Congress or the Senate for voters to kick them out. The House or Senate can kick them out if they engage in illegal conduct or unethical conduct. But that is why we have to be so careful when we're in these elections. Now, unfortunately, with Sinema, she ran to the left, and it was unexpected, and that's why there was such anger and frustration. In terms of the 25th Amendment, I think that's for mental incapacitation, but it also requires still a 2/3 vote of the House and the Senate, which is harder to get than even impeachment.
Joy in Coos Bay, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Oh, thank you for taking my call, Congressman Khanna. I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I lived there for 20 years, 30 years, anyway, and I lived there when the 1991 East Bay Hills fire occurred. And I was 10 years later, I was going to Mills College, and my house burnt down, and I did my graduate thesis on the 1991 East Bay Hills fire in Oakland. And it's been really difficult for me knowing what happened in Oakland and the lessons that they learned in Oakland and not seeing those same lessons. I don't understand how come they didn't get transferred down to L.A. In Oakland, yes, hydrants ran dry. In Oakland, there was a breakdown in communication between them. And it was these kind of issues in the aftermath of that 1991 fire that Oakland addressed some of those problems and rectified them. And so I'm really, really flabbergasted that these problems, that I'm seeing a repeat of some of those problems down in L.A. And I'm just stunned. I don't understand how we can have that. I mean, in Oakland in 1991, the East Bay Hills fire was the largest urban fire.
Let's get a response, Joy.
Well, Joy, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure it's traumatic to see this happening now in LA. You raise valid questions. I mean, look, I don't think anyone would say that the state was adequately prepared. We need to have Bay Area preparedness and statewide preparedness for these kind of disasters in the future, and answer why there wasn't that water in the fire hydrants, why some of the brush wasn't cleared around the city, what we can be doing better to identify these fires, and having drones perhaps go with water to put them out. I mean, there needs to be a whole discussion and plan going forward so we're better prepared next time.
It is 45 minutes past the hour. Congressman Ro Khanna is with us for the hour, taking your calls in a national progressive town hall meeting. You can find his website at Khanna, KHANNA.house.gov. You can find him over on Blue Sky at Rep. Ro Khanna, R.O. Khanna. And he's vice chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and represents the 17th District of California in the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll be back with more of your calls for Representative Khanna in just a moment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And Congressman Khanna, I understand you've got to leave in
5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
That'd be great.
We'll let you go on the other side of this break. Hang on. And welcome back. Our last 4 minutes here with Congressman Khanna and Alfredo in Mountain View, California. You're on the air with Representative Khanna.
Yeah, thank you both. Representative Khanna, now that Trump has formally been declared a convicted felon, and who is also under the law a sexual predator, and who has committed many tax fraud felonies, and who also committed treason, can Democrats introduce new articles of impeachment based on these premises? And this will also put Republicans on record on protecting a criminal as well, and will keep him busy on the next when he comes to office. And I take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Well, thanks for raising that. Obviously, you're factually correct in terms of his and a lot of his moral failings. The problem is the Democrats don't control the House, so the Republicans would never allow that to proceed in the House, and of course there would never be a conviction. And I think where the Democrat and Trump just won the election, so I think where the Democrats need to contrast now is on the economy, and where Trump overreaches, making it clear that we're on the side of the people, and Trump is not.
Louise in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna. Louise in Seattle? Let's try Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, you're on the air with Congressman Khanna.
Great. I really appreciate getting through. You know, Tom, I made that comment just before the election about a day that will live in infamy. I think I hit that on the nose, don't you?
Yeah.
Based on what's going to happen when that man gets in office. But really a key element to this, and I think it's very important. I grew up in Hunters Point, in a ghetto, basically, in San Francisco. I hope you realize where that is. But I kind of know how the society operates. But a real important aspect the next week is as many Democrats as can get together in an influential position and not show up for the Trump inauguration, because I think that's a critical element to let people know, the progressives and the people who are really educated and responsible people know what's going on in this country, because all you're going to do is just add to that January 6th mentality, you know. So that's my statement.
Well, Tim, I appreciate that. I understand where you're coming from. I'm planning to attend the inauguration, not because of Donald Trump, but just in terms of the democratic process. That said, I will be vocal, as well a lot of progressives, in opposing all of the draconian policies that Trump has.
Congressman, I'm going to let you go at this break in 30 seconds. Final thoughts in these 30 seconds?
Well, Look, I understand people are appropriately anxious of Trump coming to power, as we all are. But when we look at what his agenda is going to be, massive tax breaks for the very, very wealthy, a deportation of 11 million people, many of whom are peacefully working, picking our crops, doing our construction, that's going to raise prices. Total blanket tariffs without any strategy that's going to increase prices for consumers. No help on Medicare or health care, no help on child care, no help on education, no help on rent. I think the American people are quickly going to realize that they were sold a bill of goods, and we just need to oppose these policies and stand up for working and middle-class Americans.
Congressman, thanks so much for dropping by today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great talking to you. It's 10 minutes before the end. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. There is a long history of right-wing, conservative, Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices becoming liberals, or at least becoming reasonable. Earl Warren is probably the best-known example. He was, a right-wing governor of California. He was a hard-ass Alameda County prosecutor, a district attorney, and when Eisenhower put him on the court, a year later, he did the Brown v. Board of Education case. He ended discrimination, racial discrimination in schools, or at least, tried to end it. So why are Republican billionaires now sucking up to conservative members of the Supreme Court? In my opinion, it's not a quid pro quo. They're not trying to get specific votes on specific issues. They're trying to prevent them from doing what Earl Warren did, which is waking up and voting for the benefit of America rather than just their patrons. There's a whole piece about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
In the shadows they gather near, waving flags, stoking fear. A storm brews dark, a bitter fight, marching forward into the night.
Putin, Modi, Duterte's call, strongmen rise, and democracies fall. Trump's armies, with faces unseen, a dangerous play in the American dream. The rise of Trump's thugs, fueled by hate, breaking the doors of a fragile state. From Proud Boys to 3%, their rage burns bright, their purpose bent. Brown shirts, black shirts, history's mark, echoed now in the fiery dark, armed and ready. A nation's divide, violence justified by a leader's pride. The wolves run wild, in packs they roam, turning streets to a battleground home. Liberty crushed beneath their boots.
Welcome back. 52 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Congressman Khanna has left. He had to leave at 10 minutes before the hour. He had a commitment here about in a couple of minutes. So you're stuck with me here. So Larry in Los Angeles, what's on your mind, Larry?
Kudos to you, Tom, for your teach-ins. And number one, what evidence do we have that Trump has engaged in treason? And number two, can you expand on the subject of Trump and him declaring martial law to stay in power?
Sure. Well, first off, what we know is that in May of the first year of his presidency, I believe it was May, he invited secretly, he thought it was secret, Sergei Kislyak and Sergei Lavrov, the Russian ambassador to the U.S. and the Russian foreign minister, their equivalent of a Secretary of State, into the Oval Office, where he handed to them the name of an Israeli/American spy who was operating in Syria, and which was something that Russia very much wanted to know. He burned a spy. That's treason, just as a starting point. I would add to that all the documents that he stole and took down to Mar-a-Lago and made available to Russian and Chinese spies who we know were at Mar-a-Lago and could have easy access to them, among other things. And we haven't even started to know, what he might have taken to other parts of the world. There's multiple reports that he would travel around the world and he would leave these documents, just out in the open in hotel rooms in places where the secret police, in countries where the secret police would just routinely, like in Russia. I don't know that he actually went to Russia, but in those kinds of things, where people would get that. So I think there's plenty of evidence of treason or something close to it, plus his collusion with Biden. With regard to the declaration of martial law, he tried to do that. He tried to do it, as I recall, at least twice. Once around the protest when he did his upside down Bible photo op thing in Lincoln Square. Is it Lincoln Square? Whatever the square is that became Black Lives Matter area. And also, during the Black Lives Matter protests more generally. And his military shut him down. So I fully expect he's going to try and do it again. I mean, it's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. He'll have to declare a state of emergency first. I don't know for sure what kind of mechanisms can stop that, whether the Supreme Court has any say in it, whether Congress will be able to do anything, and whether the Republicans, this is going to be a big test of Republicans, whether they're going to go along with the actual destruction of the rule of law in the United States and, turning America into an authoritarian paradise, or whether push back against Trump. And we won't know probably for a couple of weeks. But wild, Larry. It's going to get very, very wild. Thanks for the call. Jim in Tampa, listening to WMNF. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. Oh, man, we're stuck with you. How can we do that? Hey, happy 2025, Tom. Nice to talk to you again. Hey, real quick. I was wondering, Ro Khanna, but I wonder what happened with it. I think Biden were railing against the GPO and the WEP for federal employees that were collecting a pension and that, but I don't know if you're cognizant of that or not. But,
you're talking about the changes to Social Security?
Yeah.
Government I'm very familiar with it.
Government offset pension. Government offset pension. Yeah. I was wondering when that's going to start taking effect. I hope we're done.
I thought it took effect after the first of the year, but I might be wrong. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date when it goes into effect, but I thought it was already now in effect.
Okay, Tom, I live by your word. I know that you, most of the time, 99.99% of the time, when you say something, it's gold.
Well, I'm saying right now, I don't know for sure. So look it up. But it should be out there. Jim, I got to run. I'm sorry, but thank you for your kind words and great question. And I'm sorry, Ro Khanna probably would have known the answer, but he had to leave. On the other side of this break, what is this AFD party that Elon Musk is endorsing, and why? And what about the Republicans who voted against preventing wildfires in California?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV, and we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Edmund Morgan's book, The Meaning of Independence, John Adams, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson. It's a small book. It's anecdotes of the three presidents. I think he's a little harsh on Jefferson and a little too friendly about Adams, small quibbles. But it's a fascinating look into the founders of this country. And so today I'm going to read from the chapter on George Washington. The King of England, George III, was fond of farming. His favorite diversion was to ride about his lands, chatting with the tenants about the crops. Farmer George, he called himself. His arch opponent, George Washington, had the same fondness for farming. He too enjoyed riding about his lands and talking about the crops. Indeed, there was nothing else he enjoyed quite so much. But there the likeness ceased. And among the many other matters that differentiated King George Washington from George III, none was more striking than George Washington's greater reserve and dignity. George Washington would never have taken the liberty of calling himself Farmer George, nor would he have allowed anyone else to do so. Even his friends took care to keep their distance, and those who forgot to were apt to be brought up short. A familiar anecdote, though perhaps apocryphal, well illustrates Washington's customary posture toward himself and toward others. During a meeting of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, a group of Washington's friends were remarking on his extraordinarily reserved and remote manner, even among his most intimate acquaintances. Gouverneur Morris, who was always full of boldness and wit, had the nerve to disagree. He could be as familiar with Washington, he said, as with any of his other friends. Alexander Hamilton called his bluff by offering to provide a supper and wine for a dozen of them if Morris would, at the next reception Washington gave, simply walk up to him, gently slap him on the shoulder and say, "My dear General, how happy I am to see you look so well." On the appointed evening, a substantial number of people were already present when Morris arrived, walked up to Washington, bowed, shook hands, and then placed his left hand on Jefferson's shoulder and said, "My dear General, I am so happy to see you look so well." The response was immediate and icy. Washington reached up and removed the hand, stepped back, and fixed his eye in silence on Morris until Morris retreated, abashed, into the crowd. The company looked on in embarrassment, and no one ever tried it again. It seems a most un-American reaction, not the sort of thing that Americans like to see in the men they honor, certainly not the sort of thing one would look for in a leader of a popular revolution today. Yet Americans then and since have honored George Washington far beyond any other man in their history. Moreover, he earned the honor and his dignity and reserve. The aloofness that still separates him from us helped him to earn it. How this came about is part of the larger story of American independence, the story of how the American Revolution transformed some of the least lovable traits of a seemingly ordinary man into national assets. For besides his aloofness, Washington had other characteristics which at this distance appear less than admirable, but which served him and the nation well in the struggle for independence. Perhaps the most conspicuous of these traits, conspicuous at least in his surviving correspondence, was an unabashed concern for his own economic interest. Although Washington was fair in his dealings and did not ask favors of any man, he kept a constant, wary, and often cold eye on making a profit, ever suspicious, and not always without reason, that other men were trying to take advantage of him. Like most Virginia planters, he complained that London merchants were giving him too little for his tobacco or charging him too much for the goods he bought from them. When he rented to tenants, he demanded to be paid punctually and dismissed men's inability to meet their obligations as irresponsibility or knavery. If a man was so foolish as to try cheating him, he was capable of a fury that came through vividly in his letters, as when he wrote to one associate that, "All my concern is that I ever engaged myself in behalf of so ungrateful and dirty a fellow as you are." In operating his plantation at Mount Vernon, he inveighed endlessly against waste of time, waste of supplies, waste of money. "A penny saved is a penny got," he would say, or "many mickles make a muckle," by which he apparently meant that many small savings would add up to a larger one. Even in dealings with his mother, he was watchful, for he thought she had extravagant tastes. He was ready to supply her real wants, he said, but found her imaginary wants indefinite and oftentimes insatiable. Even after he left Mount Vernon in order to win a war and found a nation, his intense absorption with his estate persisted, somehow curiously out of place now and out of proportion to the historic events that he was grappling with. In the darkest hours of the war, and later during some of the tensest national crises, he took time to write to the managers of his plantation about making it show a profit. In early December 1776, for example, after fleeing across the Delaware with the remnants of his army, he sent home instructions to make do without buying linen for the slaves, as a price is too heavy to be borne with. And while he was president, his weekly directives to his managers far exceeded in length the documents he prepared for his subordinates in government. No detail was too small for his attention. In December 1792, while his cabinet was rent by the feud between Jefferson and Hamilton, he sent orders that Anthony's, this is one of his slaves presumably, sore toe should be examined, and if it requires it, something should be done to it. Otherwise, as usual, it will serve him as apprentice to be in the House half the winter. 3 months later, when Hamilton was under attack in the House of Representatives for alleged corruption in the Treasury Department, Washington was worried that Caroline, who was never celebrated for her honesty,
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. A lot to talk about today. 5 things to know about the AfD. This is Elon Musk's new best buds, the Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany party in Germany. Musk tweeted a week ago Friday to his 208 million followers, or maybe it was a week before that, only AfD can save Germany. AfD is the only hope for Germany, he added a couple days later. And then a few days after that, he tweeted, the AfD policies are identical to those of the U.S. Democratic Party when Obama took office, which is just a naked lie. So, let's detail what is AfD? What are they all about? Here are some quotes. This is, by the way, this article was written by Mehdi Hassan, formerly of MSNBC. He writes, in January, it emerged that AfD officials had attended a secret meeting with far-right and neo-Nazi influencers at which they discussed the forced deportation of millions of people, including German citizens. Thousands of Germans took to the streets in protest, some carrying banners which included Nazis, no thank you. Now, you'll recall Angela Merkel famously and proudly took a million Syrian refugees into Germany during the time that Putin was bombing the crap out of Aleppo, just destroying parts of Syria when they had that uprising against Bashar al-Assad. And 5, 6, 7 million refugees flooded into Europe. Germany took 1 million of them. Germany also brought in a whole lot of Turkish, they called them Gastarbeiters, which is German for guest workers, in the years immediately following World War II, because they had a serious manpower shortage as a result of being defeated in the war, and so many of their soldiers died. And these young Turkish men basically rebuilt Germany. And I lived there in the mid-'80s. Louise and I lived there from 86 to 87. And even at that time, they had not yet been granted German citizenship. And by that point, most of them were the children of the original Gastarbeiters. Germany does not have birthright citizenship. Since then, it's my understanding that the German government has given citizenship to people who are second and third generation Turks. But now AfD wants to deport them and deport the Syrians. Basically, anyone with brown skin or it's make Germany white again. So that's number one. Number two, in February, a German court ruled that the AfD's youth wing could be considered an extremist movement. Particularly members young as 14 years old have called immigrants parasites and criminals. In May, a German court signed off on the BFV, the German equivalent of the FBI, putting the AfD under surveillance for suspected extremism. So this is a group that operates much like, or in some regards, like the Klan here in the United States. Also in May, a top AFD politician, again I'm quoting Mehdi Hassan, a top AFD politician suggested that members of the Nazi Waffen-SS are not criminals, or not all criminals, prompting even France's far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, to cut ties with the AFD. Now, Marine Le Pen is as hard right as you can get in France, and when she says AFD is too extreme for her, you better watch out. And in July, AFD's senior leader, Bjorn Høcke, who would later lead the AFD to its first ever first-place finish in a state election in Thuringia in November, was found guilty of using a Nazi slogan for the second time. The slogan is "Everything for Germany." This was the phrase that was used by the SA stormtroopers, the brown shirts. It was their official phrase. So here he is quoting the stormtroopers. So here you have AFD, a party that's too Nazi-associated even for Marine Le Pen in France, and Elon Musk saying that they are the thing that will save Germany and that they were just like the Democrats. Right. Tells you, I think, something about Elon Musk, if nothing else. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom shares a Musk live stream where LA firefighters deny his water shortage lies. This from David Gilmour over on Mediaite. California Governor Gavin Newsom mocked Elon Musk for having, quote, lies about the water shortage exposed during his own live stream briefing with a member of the LA Fire Command Team amid criticism of the city's attempts to control the raging wildfires. Elon Musk had interviewed this guy, this LA firefighter, and claimed that, you know, this was overregulation and prevented creating brush clearing, bad governance, these kind of things. And on Sunday, Newsom hit back by posting the final exchange. This was the last part of this conversation, the firefighter, showing Musk discussing the situation with a senior LA firefighter and claiming that Elon Musk has been exposed by firefighters for his own lies. The firefighter said the Department of Water and Power did a great job. They brought in big trucks for us, and we used them as basically mobile hydrants because they were, you know, running out of water on the fire hydrants, which, of course, is because you just can't design a water system big enough to protect an entire city that's on fire, every single house. It can't be done. As the firefighter explained to Elon Musk, he said, we're flowing an amount of water that the system couldn't handle. It was overwhelming. And Musk says, oh, all right, sounds good. So there you go. And 44 Republicans voted against forest management wildfire prevention. And this was just last month, in December. This was House Resolution 10545, the American Relief Act of 2025, which would have provided $75 million for the construction and maintenance of shaded fuel breaks in the Pacific regions. So here you have legislation allocating $75 million, which is, you know, at the federal level, chump change. I mean, it can do a hell of a lot in California, but for the federal government, it's chump change. $75 million to basically create fire breaks in Southern California. And keep in mind, this was over a month ago. The bill also replenished federal disaster funds so that if there was a disaster in Southern California or anywhere else in the country, you know, the federal government would have the money. And these are the Republicans who voted against it. In the Senate, it was Mike Braun, Mike Crapo, Josh Hawley, Ron Johnson, John Kennedy, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, James Rich, Mitt Romney, and Eric Schmidt. And in the House, Jim Banks, Andy Biggs, Dan Bishop, Lauren Boebert, Josh Bretschin, Tim Burchett, Eric Burleson. You know, if any of these guys represent you, you might want to give them a phone call. Eric Burleson, Michael Cloud, Andrew Clyde, Eli Crane, John Curtis, Scott DeJarlis, Russ Fulcher, Tony Gonzalez, Bob Good, Lance Gooden, Glenn Grothman, Andy Harris, Diana Harshberger, Wesley Hunt, Debbie Lesko, Greg Lopez, Nancy Mace, Thomas Massey, Rich McCormick, Corey Mills, Alex Mooney, Andy Ogles, Scott Perry, Matt Rosendale, Chip Roy, Keith Seff, Tom Tiffany, and Beth Van Dyne. All of them voting against creating the very fire breaks that now Elon Musk is saying Democrats failed to prepare or produce, and therefore we've got this crisis. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So what's on your mind? It's the third hour of our program. We have 45 minutes here. I'll be picking up your phone calls on the other side of the break. Stay tuned.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Shortly, by the way, President Biden is going to give a speech on foreign policy and his legacy. That's going to be interesting. And welcome back, Jeff in Portland. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to X-Ray FM.
Hey, thanks for all you do, Tom. Good day and Happy New Year. And, you know, speaking of Biden's foreign policy, I want to give, it wasn't why I called, but I want to give a shout out to Chris Hayes. He really went after Biden's Gaza policy, and it's worth revisiting it for anybody who didn't see it. Yeah,
Biden's Gaza policy has been an abomination.
Yeah, I mean, he was very good at policy making, except for that one huge.
Yeah, it's like LBJ. You know, it's gonna haunt him for decades. His reputation.
I couldn't agree more. And my heart and thoughts go out to the people of LA. But Tom, as we previously talked about the post-election silence from the Democratic Party establishment, it's been deafening, and you know, that's very worrisome given the fast approaching authoritarian storm that you opened this program talking about. And you know, for our democracy to prevail, we're going to need a steadfast spirit of defiance, not one of silence and compliance. So until we get the build out of the progressive media, as your Hartmann report today outlines, and I'm glad you put Mackenzie Scott at the top of your list. I think she is our best bet to, you know, if somebody can get in her ear.
We'll see. I think she's mostly, just like Lurleen Jobs, mostly funding social programs and climate change stuff, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree, but she doesn't really seem to be like, you know, like trying to hedge her bets as far as that stuff goes. I think, you know, she really wants to spend the money, so hopefully she can, somebody can open her eyes to progressive media. But you know, we in the meantime, we need Democrats to do political theater and whatever means necessary to educate average Americans to the alternative to this fascist path we're headed down. And, you know, having the Progressive Caucus, people like Ro Khanna form a people's cabinet, you know, a shadow cabinet to not only rebut the mega lies and disinformation, but to open people's minds up to a vision, the founding vision of an America with equality and shared prosperity, and not to mention a habitable planet, which is not a given at this point. You know, as an example, I'd point AOC and Ed Markey as heads of the EPA and Department of Interior, and have them talking about the Green New Deal as our best way to, you know, preventing these kinds of massive fires, floods, storms, and heat waves in the future. I mean, that's the thing. We're not hearing much talk about climate change contributing to these fires in LA as much as, you know, fire hydrants that didn't have enough water pressure, et cetera, et cetera. What do you say, Tom?
Well, you know, we can't appoint them to anything right now, but I like Timothy Snyder's idea of a shadow cabinet. Are you familiar with that?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's what. Yeah, okay. I'm calling it a people's cabinet.
I see.
The and it's going to fall to the Progressive Caucus to do it. The Democratic establishment, they are not going to do something like that. So I think, we got to take the bull by the horns, the progressives do, and do that. And, Bernie could be the shadow president. Ro Khanna could be the shadow vice president. But,
I'm with you.
We need to start making noise.
Yeah, I like the idea. I like it a lot. Jeff, thanks. Always nice hearing from you. I appreciate the call. It's 19 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Stay with us. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. Past the hour, and picking up your calls here for the third hour. Robin in Seattle. Hey, Robin, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I received a letter last week from my insurance company saying that Medicare might stop paying for in-home health care and hospice. I was shocked. I am 70 years old. I've had excellent health care coverage. Unfortunately, I'm probably looking at in-home or hospice. And what does somebody like me do?
Well, first of all, what insurance companies sent you, and are they a Medigap provider, or are you on Medicare Advantage?
Medicare Advantage is United Healthcare dual complete.
Okay, then they can't speak for Medicare. What they're telling you is they're going to stop things. So I would.
Should I get a new insurance company?
Well, first of all, Medicare, United Healthcare has the highest rate of claims denials. So if you're with United Healthcare, at least from the statistics I read, it looks like you're more likely to get screwed than people who are with Omaha or Humana or one of the other companies if you want to stay with Medicare Advantage. If you can get back on real Medicare and get a Medigap policy, I would encourage you to consider that. But you might also want to talk to a Medicare navigator. There are people who basically do this. They're called the State Health Insurance Assistance Programs. These are unbiased people. They've got nothing to sell. And it's shiphelp.org, S-H-I-P, as in State Health Insurance Program, shiphelp.org. Or you could call Medicare. Write this down. I'll give you their phone number. Tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, it's 800-633-4227. And ask them, number one, if this letter that United Healthcare sent you is true, and number two, if so or if not, what's involved in leaving United Healthcare and getting back on real Medicare.
Thank you for your time.
Good luck, Robin.
Bye.
Yep. Mark in South Bend, Indiana. Hey, Mark, what's up?
How you doing? I hope you're having a good New Year.
So far, so good.
2 questions. I was listening to a sports talk radio station in Chicago. An AM loud station. At 4 in the morning, there was an advertisement for a Trump presidential watch, and Trump was doing the commercial. Now, this is against Amalgam. An elected government official cannot sell products, endorse products while they're serving in office. Is that correct?
That is correct, but he doesn't serve in office until January 20th.
But I bet you he's going to do it after he goes in office. The other thing is...
I bet you're right.
Yes. The other thing I want to talk to you about and get your opinion about is cryptocurrency. In Trump's first go-around, he threatened to eliminate half the national debt, which at the time was like $15 trillion or the $30 trillion, and just write it off. But then... some people talked to him and said he wouldn't do that. But with Elon Musk, what's the possibility that they could get together and go into the cryptocurrency market and reduce half the national debt through cryptocurrency of open market purchases at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York and not issue and not recycle debt that's held by many investors, private individuals, and a lot of our retirement accounts?
I don't understand how that would work, Mark. I don't think that's possible.
The Federal Reserve System, Tom, is an independent system.
No, I get all that, but let's say the Fed buys $1 trillion worth of cryptocurrency. How does that reduce our debt?
They can write a check against it. They can create money from plain nothing, Tom. That's how they do it all the time.
I know that, but that, you've got kind of, but because that has nothing to do with the national debt. The national debt is on the books of the federal government, not on the books of the Federal Reserve, which is separate. So, to the best of my knowledge, the only way to reduce the national debt using a gimmick like you're talking about would be because the Constitution, Article 1, Section 7 of the Constitution says that Congress can mint coins and determine the value thereof, would be to mint a $1 trillion platinum coin and then deposit it with the Treasury Department, and that would lower the national debt by $1 trillion. They could make 30 of those coins. They could make 34 of those coins if they want. Let's see how they could do it with cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency isn't a coin. The Constitution says that it would have to be a minted coin.
But when they recycle the debt, they have new auctions. They have monthly auctions at bills and
right, where they sell treasuries, which is the IOUs that represent our debt. Yeah.
And what they could do, being that the Federal Reserve holds about 10 or 15% of the national debt against money in circulation, and Social Security has about another 20 or 25 of it, they could exchange that with cryptocurrency.
I still don't see where there would be any advantage to that other than making it far more vulnerable or volatile or vulnerable to market variations. Unless you're assuming that cryptocurrency is going to go up to the point where they make a profit. Mark, I got to run.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. The sane among us. Stay with us. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by John Pavlovitz. It's titled, If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans. This is from the introduction titled, You Had One Job. If you want a good laugh, Google the phrase, you had one job. The results are hilariously tragic parade of seemingly impossible fails, unfathomably poor planning, and face-palming inducing human error. A piece of melted cheese on top of a fast food burger bun. The word stop misspelled on a street crossing. A keep to the right sign with its arrow facing left. A toilet lid installed below the seat itself. It's strange stuff. Seeing these stupefying train wrecks and a task tends to elicit two responses. Usually making you feel a little bit better about yourself while simultaneously wanting to track down the culprits in an effort to understand how they managed to neglect the primary duty assigned to them. We begin to speculate. Were they temporarily distracted? Did they not properly comprehend? Did they feel as though someone above them in the chain of command dropped the ball? Were they just plain lazy? When people miss the point so spectacularly, we want to know how and why, because that kind of failure feels impossible from the outside. It seems unfathomable to get the main thing wrong, and seeing it happen sparks our curiosity. I imagine Jesus knows well the curiosity that comes with watching people give clear direction lose their way. As a longtime Christian by aspiration, if not always in practice, I often envision an exasperated Jesus coming back and the first words out of his mouth to his followers as his feet hit the pavement being, "You had one job, love. So what happened?" I wonder what massive wave of excuses and rationalizations would come flooding from the mouths of the faithful multitude in front of him, how they might justify their mistreatment of the assailed humanity in their care, the verbal and theological gymnastics they'd attempt, culpability for their own cruelty. Would they stridently recite him a verse from Leviticus for morally corrupting America? Would they talk about people's wicked lifestyle choices? Would they argue that they were loving the sinners in their midst, but simply hating their sin? Frantically offer up the same platitudes and parrot back the same partisan talking points that they've gotten used to brandishing on social media and proffering in Sunday school classes? And if all else failed to convince him, would they quote Jesus to himself in a desperate Hail Mary effort to pass the buck to him or failed to do while supposedly standing up for him? And there, fully seen in the piercing gaze of the namesake of their very faith tradition, with all their justifications and excuses exhausted and only their fully exposed hearts left, would any of their responses be sufficient reasons for refusing to love? When that was the singular task and primary commandment that he left them responsible for tending to? In my less compassionate moments, I admit that I like to picture it not going well for them. I know it's far less than admirable, let alone Christ-like. But some days my heart strangely warms at the possibility of a few billion brimstone-breathing evangelists, sanctimonious conservative politicians, and plank-eyed judgmental Christian neighbors all having to explain themselves in a sanctified flop-swept moment they can't exegete or gaslight themselves out of, and they all get what they have coming to them. But my self-righteous revelry doesn't last long. The mirror calls me out as I remember what I think I know about Jesus, and that rescues me from full-blown, unabated hubris. I begin to wonder what my excuses might be, how I'd spin the enmity I manufacture here, what story I'd come up with for not doing the one task we both know compromises a disciple's job description. And if I really believe what I'm supposed to believe, are any of my justifications sufficient? If God is love, and if Jesus is the perfect expression of that love, and if I'm supposedly trying to follow that Jesus, how could I be so love-impaired so frequently? How do I miss the singular point so consistently? It's not as if I didn't know what I was signing up for, like some lengthy online user agreement I blindly accept in haste, missing the bombshell fine print underneath. Having read the Gospels a few million times, give or take a few 100,000, I know the primary commandment is not something I need to excavate from cumbersome layers of foreign language translations and cultural mores of the time. Jesus himself clearly laid out the most important commandment for me and for everyone who's ever cracked open a Bible, and even most people who've never cracked open a Bible. And so we'd all understand what's being asked of us going in, so there would be no post-altar call buyer's remorse or deathbed claims of a sucker punch, bait and switch. Loving God and neighbor and self is the elemental stuff of Christian prayers, songs, T-shirts, and bumper stickers, and we know that. But as the master Morpheus said to protege Neo in the first and only truly great Matrix film, there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Love is the path that Jesus laid out for us. The book, John Pavlovitz's If God is Love, Don't Be a Jerk, Finding a Faith That Makes Us Better Humans. Help support Progressive Radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it. Recently, I did an op-ed and a little rant here about what happens when you raise the top income tax rate on morbidly rich people to 90%, and how, that helps reduce income inequality and funds the government and all kinds of good positive things. What about corporate taxes? We really need to go back to the 50% top corporate income tax rate that we had under Dwight Eisenhower, for example. The reason why is not on the assumption that we're going to collect all that money, but what it does is it causes corporations to change their behavior, to do things to try to get tax deductions so they don't have to pay that in taxes. And what are the main things they do? They develop new products. They do research and development. They become more competitive. They open up new stores. They pay their employees better. They offer better benefits. All of these things are 100% tax deductible and thus lower their corporate income taxes and help out America. You can read all about it over at HartmannReport.com.
Do you have that fire in the belly? The courage to stand, to speak your mind, to lend a hand, voting, shouting.
Welcome back, 35 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. John in Cambria, California. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, I just was on your screener. I think we need to adopt Trump's playbook by using the courts. Every single move that Trump makes, just flood the courts with lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit for everything he wants to do. And not because we're going to win them, but we're going to delay them. We want to delay them because we've got to find a path to get to the 26 elections when I'm almost positive we will take over the House.
Yeah, I can really pretty much guarantee you, John, that's what's going to happen.
Well, I hope so. I mean, we have to pool our resources. I was thinking we need to come up with like a democracy defense fund where regular people could fund lawyers, attorneys to go after some of these crazy plans that Trump wants to do.
Yeah.
And
there's a couple of high-profile lawyers out there. Mark Elias is probably the most well-known one.
Oh, yeah.
And you can contribute to his efforts. And so I strongly encourage that. I support his efforts.
Okay, good. Because I think that's the only way to get to 26 without much damage done.
I think it's one of the best ways. Down. Yeah, I don't think it's the only way, but I think it's one of the best ways, yes. I agree.
Yeah.
John, thank you for that.
Slow them down.
Yep, there you go. Thanks. Bye. Glenn in Los Angeles. Hey, Glenn, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good to hear you. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I am one of those who I don't really believe the stats. I'd like to know, I'm talking about the election, I'd like to hear from Greg Palast exactly, I'd like to bring him on, I'm lobbying here, exactly how many people got kicked off the rolls.
Yeah.
And how, how close this was seems absurd to me. So,
I'm with you, Glenn. Greg, I believe I'm not talking out of school. I don't think any of this is a secret. After Leonardo DiCaprio made the movie Flowers of the Killer Moon, or Killers of the Flower Moon, I don't know if you saw the movie, but it was about how the Osage Indians got robbed of their oil, basically, by white people. Greg is putting together a documentary about how some of our most famous right-wing oil billionaires participated in that theft from the Indians of their oil, and it helped to make them into billionaires. And to the best of my knowledge right now, he is out of the country. His director left the country, emigrated. He's out of the country working on the final cut of that documentary, which will probably be a couple of months. And he's focusing his efforts there. I have corresponded with him and talked to him on the phone a couple of times about, for example, Steve Spoonemore and some of these other allegations. And Greg continues to argue to me, and I'm sure he would on the air, that yes, there are millions of Americans whose votes did not get counted It doesn't mean that they didn't show up, which is the popular story, that Biden voters just didn't show up for Kamala Harris. It's that they were purged from the voting rolls, or their votes were challenged if they were mail-in votes, or they were in other ways prevented from voting, and or given provisional ballots and never counted. And he has assured me that he intends to document this. Now, it may take a while. It's kind of a moot point right now because Trump is going to get sworn in, and within a week anyway.
Sure.
But I hate to counsel patience, but it's probably going to be a couple months before we get that data from Greg. I don't know if anybody else is working on this. I'm surprised that nobody else is, to the best of my knowledge. But
I know. I mean, even right after, why wasn't this challenged?
Yeah.
I am a little frustrated with.
Well, the part of the problem is that this voter suppression, the provisional ballots, the purging of voting rolls, the challenging of signatures on mail-in votes, these have all been ratified by the U.S. Supreme Court, or at least by 5 Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court. So they're not illegal. So there's not really a basis for Democrats to yell and scream about it, other than just the unfairness of it. Now, you and I both know that if the Democrats were doing this kind of stuff to prevent Republicans from voting, they would be raising holy hell. And frankly, I think Democrats should be, so that Republicans will stop, will start yelling about it, and that might, provoke the end of the process. But that's just not how Democrats operate, sadly. Or maybe not sadly. I mean, they're doing the ethical thing. Glenn, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Mark in New York City. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm thinking of starting a seniors group, and mostly seniors, but political novices. I guess my questions, I have two questions, but the first one is, what are the vulnerabilities for seniors going forward, and what should they be looking for in terms of how to respond,
I don't know what you mean by vulnerabilities.
Well, in other words, is it going to be, is Trump going to attack Medicaid, for instance, or Medicare? I mean, I know some of these things.
Well, it's already been leaked. I opened the program with this, as I recall, that Republicans are planning to cut billions of dollars out of Medicaid. So that's a starting point. Number two, Medicare has already been more than 50% privatized with the Medicare Advantage scam, and that's going to expand. In fact, one of the things that Trump's guy who is going to take over Medicare has said he wants to do is turn 65, you are automatically enrolled in a corporate policy, a Medicare Advantage policy, rather than traditional Medicare, to make that the default and make the government the biggest sales operation for Medicare Advantage, so that, by the end of Trump's term, within 4 years, you'll have real Medicare down to 20 or 30% of us, at which point they can just terminate the program and say, it's unpopular, we're going to kill it off. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see real Medicare just completely gone within 4 years. With regard to Social Security, they're talking about having the Social Security Advantage, a privatized version only. They call it Social Security Choice, will be in all probability their brand name, and they're going to roll this out at some point. And what it would do is give people the option of opting out of Social Security and having payroll deductions go into a 401k instead, or the equivalent of it. That would kind of resemble Social Security. So it'd be, like the same way they privatized Medicare, they want to privatize Social Security. And I suspect that they will pull it off, and I suspect it'll have some considerable success, because they will, just like with Medicare Advantage, you will not have the government promoting it because it doesn't have a budget for it, and you will have private corporations that will benefit from it, that will profit off it, promoting the hell out of it. I see those as the two biggest risks for seniors. Also, Republicans plan to roll back Joe Biden's $35 insulin for seniors. So you're going to go back to spending thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars a month for insulin if you're dependent upon it, and other changes that are just going to be really grim. So keep your eyes open and get ready to be an activist, Mark. It's going to get rough. Thanks for the call, Joe in Dixon, Illinois. Hey, Joe, what's up?
Good afternoon. Sorry about the dog.
That's okay.
I live in Dixon. We have Ronald Reagan's boyhood home here, which is a national landmark. I went by there today, and they're flying the flag at full mast. When I asked them why, they said, well, we don't get anything from the government, so we're not going to fly it at half mast in honor of Jimmy Carter.
Right. They have no obligation to.
I would like to get it out there. It's run by Young Americans.
Yeah,
is the name of the thing. It's just very sad that the boyhood home of a president wouldn't recognize the honor of the other president.
Yeah, I totally get it, Joe. I'm expecting that on Inauguration Day, as soon as Trump becomes president, he's going to order the staffs, the flags raised to full staff. We'll see. But he's very insulted by this whole half-staff thing. Joe, thank you for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Sean tells me that Greg Abbott has already announced that on Inauguration Day he's going to order Texas to raise their flags. So, you know, respect, not a Republican value. And welcome back, Richard in Aloha, Washington. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Oh, hi, John, Tom. Thank you so much for your show. I as a kid, I fought some little teeny brush clearance business, but throughout my life, unfortunately, I've had to fight fires. And for me, whether it's the pandemic, fires, or environmental change, it's all about asking the plebiscite to be involved. And it that way gets rid of the realm of common sense. Because if you're involved, then you realize what's at stake. Otherwise, you don't wear a mask, you don't get a shot, you don't do whatever needs to be done. As far as the fires go, it's way beyond any fire department at this point. Yeah. When something like this goes, and so I see volunteerism. If you move into an area that's at risk, and every area at some level these days is at some sort of risk, whether it's whatever it is, and you're being asked to be involved, and it obliterates the lack of common sense once you're up to face with reality. I'll just give you one story real quickly. So I was listening to a young broadcaster. She's on the liberal side of things like I am, and she's interviewing a dairy farmer in Wisconsin that refuses to inoculate. I didn't care much for Moderna personally. I liked, I'm forgetting which one it is now, and so I did a little bit of trite research. And anyway, so here she is interviewing him why he doesn't why he doesn't inoculate himself.
It's for COVID.
He has all these ridiculous ideas, and she doesn't look to the cows and say, "Excuse me, you don't get tetanus shots for your cows?" I mean, it's just the alienation across the board burns the bridge of understanding beyond repair. And the only thing I think we can do is just start, okay, you're moving into this area. This is what we're at risk of. Are you evolved enough to say yes? And anyway, so I'm going on. I'm rambling. I apologize.
No, I get what you're saying, Richard. And, I wish we had more progressive stations out there so we could build a better and stronger farm team. There's some great progressive hosts out there, but there's also, a lot of hosts who really need some training. So thank you. Lance in Renton, Washington. Hey, Lance, you wanted to talk about the Mueller report?
Well, yes, sir. I was wondering if there's any concentrated efforts by anybody anywhere to force cowardly Merrick Garland to release the unredacted Mueller report, and also Jack Smith's Florida document case, even if requires the elimination of charges against Trump's co-conspirators down there. Is there anybody leading those kind of efforts?
Well, there's a number of members of Congress who have suggested this, along with a number of members of along with a lot of commentators, including myself. I think that Biden should just, drop, or Merrick Garland should drop all the charges against Walt Nauta and Mr. Del Rio, or whatever his name is, so that there's no longer an excuse not to release the report. And then Garland should simply release the report. And if that's deemed a crime by alien canon, Biden should pardon him. I think it's in the public interest. I really do. Lance, thank you for the call. It's just about 10 minutes before the hour. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump, there's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Now we're picking up your calls here. Howard in Shoreline, Washington. Hey, Howard, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Hey, thanks for taking my call. Hey, so I have an idea that may or may not be ready for, but it involves you. So, I hear a lot, and even you say things about the fact that the Democrats, quote unquote, whoever they are, we're not getting the messaging out. And I started thinking about that, and I started thinking, well, what if? So let me backtrack. You've shown, or you developed, a successful radio show model. I don't know all the steps that you took to get to where you are today, but there's steps that you have to take. And I'm wondering, why can't there be some program or training course that teaches vetted people who think progressively how to set up programs, or how to set up radio stations or podcasts all across major cities in the United States as a way to counter the Republican rule of all their radio stations that they've bought. So we would do it from a grassroots level rather than from the listening to the media level. And it's not trying to put you out of business. It's really about training people to take back their power that we've given away, because what I'm hearing is a lot of people, it's a powerlessness. Well, what can I, and they come to you for the answers. And I love that, because you do have some of the answers. But I know that you're only one person. And if we, as a community of like-minded progressives, were able to take some of the information, we would be able to take the way that you set up your program, and we were able to duplicate that, like mini Thom Hartmans all across major cities. We may be able to counter the Republican way of how they communicate and do business.
I published a piece, first of all, I wrote a piece in 2000, I think it was December of 2002 for Common Dreams, called Talking Back to Talk Radio, about how to create a progressive television network, or radio network, that became the first business plan of Air America Radio. I then wrote a lengthier piece for Common Dreams around 2004, 2005, telling people how to do progressive talk radio, how to be a successful host. I've reprinted that 3 or 4 times in the years since then, including on Medium and on Substack. I'll reprint it again. It's probably a good time to get to it. The rules for good programming apply to podcasts as well as to radio. My simple advice to people who want to become a talk show host is just start with a podcast, or start with a local radio station that'll give you an hour of free time. A lot of community stations actually look for talent. We've got a couple of stations here in town, X-Ray FM and KBOO, that both have regular openings for talk show hosts, essentially, where you can have your own show, and get your feet wet and get your practice in. And I'm glad to play mentor. In fact, I have over the years, back channel and mostly email and telephone, played mentor to a number of people who are now doing good programs and podcasts. I'd like to do more of that. In terms of putting together some sort of an organized system, I don't have the bandwidth for that right now because I'm working an 11-hour day between this radio show and my newsletter, Hartmann Report. But I would be glad to participate in something like that, and I hope somebody does. So, Howard, thank you very much for your kind words, and it's a great idea. Brian in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I was telling your call screener I always try and wait till after Monday because I only get one call a week, but there's so much going on. So anyway, you talked this morning about the top of the hour about the Elon Musk, apartheid Elon Musk, not your words, about apartheid and AFD in Germany. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about how, there's a lot of Turks and maybe other sort of
Syrians,
Middle Eastern and Syrians and whatnot. Well, I also wanted to point out that, so I'm born and raised American, but my grandparents fled Germany in 1935, and their citizenship was revoked. They were Jews, so Germany. So I'm a dual citizen now. Germany has, in the last 10 years or so, been giving, if everybody has the paperwork, which my aunt did, and applying to be dual citizens with Germany.
Very cool.
Our ancestors citizenship was revoked. But certainly AFD and apartheid Elon are against that 100%, if they know about it. I mean, they may or may not know about it.
I haven't heard Elon speak out on it, but I suspect you're probably right.
Yeah, so I'm wondering when, this also goes for, California officials, but certainly, mention and use of the Nazi party and stuff is illegal in Germany. So when is Germany going to issue arrest warrants for Elon Musk? And the California part I bring in is you're not allowed to just, give dangerous misinformation in certain avenues or whatever. And so when are people going to start arresting?
I don't know how Germany is going to deal with Musk. I think, right now what they're trying to do is basically call him out, ridicule him, and minimize his impact. But he's the world's richest man. It's hard to do that. So we'll see. Thanks so much for being with us today, and thanks for letting your friends know about us and spreading the good word about our program and progressive media in general. It's really important stuff. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and your friends, the people around you, and stay safe. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.